Going to call the February 28, 2022 meeting of the Woodbridge Board of Education to order at 7:05 p.m. with a reminder to all those watching and participating to kindly mute the microphone in order to avoid background noise. This meeting is being held virtually via WebEx and is being recorded. The recording will be available on the district website. Going to call the roll call. Board members, please unmute yourself to identify if you're here. Dr. Maria Madonic.
Present.
Ms. Sarah Beth Delpreet.
Present.
Dr. Jay Daya.
Present.
Ms. Brooke Hopkins.
Here.
Mr. Jeff Hughes.
Present.
Dr. David Ross. I don't see David. Dr. Michael Strambler. I don't see Mike. Ms. Erin Williamson.
Present.
And I'm Lynn Piasek, the chair of the board. Staff in attendance this evening include Dr. Jonathan Budd, Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Richard Hewitt, Interim Director of Business and Operations. I'm not sure if Cheryl's here. Cheryl's there, I see her. Ms. Jeanette Kiesel, Director of Special Services. Ms. Annalisa Sherman, Principal. Mr. James Sapia, Assistant Principal, I don't know.
Present.
Thanks, Jimmy. And Ms. Marcia DeGennaro, Clerk of the Board. This evening I would ask Brooke, would you be willing to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Just make sure you unmute yourself, Brooke.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Brooke. Item 1C on the agenda, correspondence. Sarah Beth, do we have any correspondence this evening?
Yes, we are in receipt of a letter from the WEA president and 2 letters from parents, which those letters can all be viewed in board book if anyone would like.
Thank you. Public comment. If there is public comment, would you please raise your hand in the participants list?
Lynn, I'm seeing Daniel Cowan, the hand raised.
Thank you. I'm going to read the statement. The board welcomes public participation and is appreciative of the feedback we receive from the community, whether it is through letters or public comment at meetings. If you are making a public comment at tonight's meeting, please be aware that the board will not respond to any comments made during the public comment period, except to clarify issues. We will take into consideration your comments, and when appropriate, district administration will follow up with you at a later point in time. We ask that speakers limit their comments to 3 minutes. Dr. Madonic and Mr. Hughes will serve as the timekeepers this evening, so I will ask that when the allotted 3 minutes is indicated, that speakers respectfully conclude their statements. Mr. Cowan, could you identify yourself? And when you begin, we'll hit start.
My name is Daniel Cowan. I live at 33 Wedgewood Drive. I also had the privilege of serving on this board 2 years ago. At that time, Dr. Martin Kodor of the Harvard Medical School spoke to many of these very same board members and advised them that herd immunity was the most likely conclusion to the SARS-CoV-2 outbreak. Attempts to vaccinate or have severe mitigation strategies would prove ineffective at preventing the spread. would also have long-term ill effects on the children. This has proven to be the case over the last 2 years, with Omicron being the sole reason this quote-unquote pandemic has just ended. At that time, 6 out of the 9 Board of Ed members indicated they wished to close the school, even after his recommendation was to keep it open. It was only after 70% of the parents indicated they wanted the in-person option that they relented in their own personal desires and opinions. It was proven at that time that this board was disconnected from the population, lacked the ability to listen to a wise advisor, and instead held to their own personal hubris and pride for their own personal biases. It has such been demonstrated that this board did not have the knowledge or foresight to make that choice, and they should not have made that choice on a masking policy either. Nearly a year later, when it was recommended by a board member that we amend the policy to have a metric to remove masks, it was voted down, instead defaulting to the dictates of the state for the guidance. Now this board is eager to hold on to for their will to force themselves on other people's bodies against their will. If your ideas are so good, why the coercion and force? If the language I use is startling and disturbing, maybe you should think about what you're doing to other people and their children. I'm only describing your actions and your desired actions in plain terms. This decision should have been left to the parents, for the parents know their children the best. The quote-unquote science has not changed. What has changed was the political climate, and our own governor admitted the key reason he needed to keep the state of emergency in place is to continue to have federal funding flow into the state. That is the definition of politicizing a public health issue. You as a board of education have been sent here to provide a community education to our children, to make sure that all the staff have adequate facilities, sufficient supplies to make sure the children are instructed on how to communicate and calculate and prepare them for the rigorous academics of middle school. SEL and other distractive education issues have no place here until the basic education of the children is being provided by this district. Please focus on the facility and the academics. In conclusion, I ask one of the Board of Ed members to make a motion that all SARS-CoV-2 policies be removed from the district policy manual and the decisions regarding masking be returned to the parents without exception. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cowan. You can put your hand down in the participants list. Thank you. Any other public comment? I don't see any. Jeff, do you?
No, one last scroll through. I'm not seeing any.
I see.
Wait, I do see some.
Turkos.
I actually do see them. Thank
There's
you.
several.
I see Darryl Brooks has his hand raised.
Yes. Hi.
Could you
name is
identify yourself and we'll start your time.
My name is Darryl Brooks. I am a parent of a student who attends Beecher Road. My son, Darryl Joshua Brooks, is a part of the Open Choice program. And while overall our experience in Woodbridge has been one of an educational delight for DJ, primarily all of his friends that he started preschool with at the Yellow Dame has moved on and matriculated from Yellow Dame into Woodbridge, and he's enjoyed those close relationships. However, his mother and I, as parents of a child of color, have voiced some concerns to his teachers and to the administration. Prior to this last event, we had some concerns about DJ being affirmed as a student of color. He was recently asked by a classmate in the classroom if he could have a pass to use the word nigger. My son has been traumatized. My son has been challenged with this. He was stunned, didn't know how to take the request. And I'm concerned because, you know, as my son is finally moving through and getting ready to go to the middle school, his entire time here at the school, at the Woodbridge School has not been a place where he, as an African-American child, has been affirmed. He doesn't see those images, certainly doesn't have that in teachers, but to be asked this question has been problematic and a challenge for him as a student, and then for his parents. As an African-American male, for me to have my son relive some of the experiences that I've lived in my lifetime, for him to have to deal with that in 2022, I'm sorry, is a problem. And I like this board to really consider how children of color, in particular in the open choice program, is going to be engaged, reaffirmed in Woodbridge, and feel safe. My son was violated. It was discriminatory practice, and the student has yet to apologize. And so I'm concerned about his well-being and his welfare. And I think all children should have a safe place in the Woodbridge school system. Thank you for giving me this time.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. I now see Kristen Turkos.
Hi, my name is Kristen Turkos. I live at 14 Bear Hill Road. I just wanted to thank the Board of Education for their thoughtful dialogue last week regarding the update to the masking policy and for their time listening to and reading public comment. I recognize that it was a difficult decision with many points of view. I'm not sure that everyone is satisfied with the outcome, but I am confident that the students in our school will be respectful of the choices that others make in the school community going forward. One issue that I was wondering about is that I'm still trying to wrap my brain around why the Woodbridge school decision was different than those in surrounding communities, including the high school in our own town. I realize that Bethany, Orange, Woodbridge, and Amity are governed by separate bodies, but I do not understand why the Woodbridge administration only was not able to suggest a rollout for a transition and obtain test kits in time at the same time as the other schools. Amity High School was already sending test kits home with students last week before the decision was even made. So in the future, I feel like no matter what the outcome, I would hope that decisions like this would be made with more thought as to how they will affect families with children in multiple schools in town. The date discrepancy with, Woodbridge rolling out unmasking 1 week after all the other schools is really unfair to people in our community with children in multiple schools in town. I also just had a question about the student survey that was given to the 5th and 6th graders. I do realize that parents had to give permission for their children to take the survey, but one of the questions asked about the gender and gave the selections male, female, or non-binary/other. I was just wondering if the term... What?
It was non-binary or did not.
No, that's different. I was just wondering if the term non-binary was defined to the children prior to taking the survey and how that was explained to 10-year-olds in the school setting. I realize that you can't answer questions from public comment, but maybe if one of the board members could bring that up, or if the administration could clarify at some point. Students may have had questions about that language because they may have not heard it before, and I was just wondering if you could clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Turkos. Dr. Budd, do you want to clarify now, or do you want to wait till you give your report?
I think it'll probably come up in Ms. Sherman's presentation.
Okay. You wait for that, Kristen, and I think we'll have some information for you. Mr. Brooks, could you put your hand down in participant list? Ms. Turkos, could you do the same? I see Jeffrey Luck has his hand raised. Identify yourself and we'll start the timer.
Hey, thanks, Lynn. Jeffrey Luck, Country Club Drive. Just wanted to go through some of the things that are going to be on the agenda today. One of the things I know Dr. Budd's going to be discussing is the diversity, equity, and inclusion study for the 5th and 6th grade. I'm still trying to figure out why this was given to these students, and especially like what previous callers or speakers just said about, how do these kids really know how they identify and how it was actually broken down. If they were so confident in giving this kind of study or a questionnaire, why is it that it was only delivered to the 5th and 6th grade students to respond to, not automatically sent to all the parents throughout the whole school to see what the 5th and 6th grade classes were being asked about their identity, their gender, how they're being treated? a lot of these questions came back, unknown. They weren't sure how to answer. It's just something that should have been given to the host school. All the parents should have seen, not the choice to be seen, but just sent out with the agenda. I'm not sure if there's going to be public comment after this, all the presentations, to go back to respond to anything that might be said. So if that's the only thing that you can answer, I'd love to know that. In general, I wish more people were on these calls. It's always the same 5 or 6 people that always tend to speak. And I just wish, if you are listening on either side of what you agree in, for or against this or that, stop spewing the garbage on Facebook on one side or another. If you have an opinion, why don't we make it known publicly? Let people have the discussion, because the faceless way behind Facebook is cowardly. And I just think we should have more of an open discussion and feel comfortable speaking to the school board, to the superintendents, and everybody else as parents and teachers, and be as one as you want to be with this diversity, equity, and inclusion, and stop trying to treat us all differently and pointing out the differences of everybody, and just treat us the same, because I still don't understand how any of this has to do with these teachers reading, writing, and arithmetic, teaching them in class, and talking about, diversifying, and hiring. Why don't we hire the right person for the job? If your problem is the teachers, hire the right teachers. If the problems are the students, let's correct it. But stop looking at all the focusing on this socialness, and focus on the actual students and what we're trying to teach. Thank you for your time, and hopefully we'll have open forum after the presentations.
Thank you, Mr. Luck. Just for your information, item 5 dot A at the end of the agenda after new business is public comment again.
Thank you.
Well, I'm just going to scroll through one more time to see if there's any other public comment. I don't see any. Dr. Budd, do you see any? Thank you. All right. Moving on to item 2. I'm sorry, 1.E, Board of Selectmen update. Ms. McCraven.
Good evening. I'll just be very brief to give you an update. The Board of Selectmen met on February 22nd to consider and act on recommendation for next year's town budget. Overall, we trimmed the expenditure request down from 56.8 million to 55.4 million, roughly. These changes, combined with some very modest grand list growth and some small increases in non-tax revenue to the town, would result in a mill rate of 44.95. That would be 5.42% increase over the current year, an increase in taxes. So that is quite high. And if that were enacted, it would be among the highest mill rates in the state of Connecticut. However, the Board of Finance will be taking up next these Board of Selectmen recommendations for the budgets, and they will make their own recommendations this Thursday. Specific to the Woodbridge Board of Ed, the Board of Selectmen made a roughly $45,000 reduction to the Board of Ed's request, and that results in an 8.92% increase over your current Woodbridge Board of Ed budget. So as we stated at the meeting, we appreciate that the Woodbridge Board of Ed has very carefully identified needs at the school, and we're looking forward to continuing to work collaboratively to ensure that we can work out a plan to sustainably fund these needs over the coming years. So that was a report from the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you, Sheila. Item 2, consent agenda. The minutes from the January 18, 2022 regular meeting, the January 27, 2022 special meeting, and the January 28, 2022 special meeting are included in this evening's consent agenda, along with both a budget narrative, a budget summary, and a detailed financial report. Is there anything that any board member wishes to extract from tonight's consent agenda? Hearing none, may I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Maria? Maria's moving to approve the consent agenda as presented. Do I have a second? Jeff Hughes? Seconded. Since I can't see everyone on my screen, I'm going to have to call the Maria?
Yes.
Sarah Beth?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Brooke?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Erin?
Yes.
And I vote yes. It's unanimous, Marcia. Thank you. Moving on, 3.A, Superintendent's Report. Dr. Budd, you're on.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. This evening, we have a significant presentation coming up with important implications for our district. But prior to that, I have a few comments related to our standing agenda item of the Safe Return Plan and COVID-19 guidelines. As I think you're all aware, Mass Choice will be implemented at Beecher Road School effective next Monday, March 7th. As moved by the board last Wednesday evening, we're also developing a database metric to be used to determine when the board might need to reconvene to assess reinstituting the mask policies that have been suspended as of March 7th. This afternoon, Connecticut superintendents received information from the Connecticut Public Health Commissioner indicating that, quote, CDC experts are working now to update guidance for K-12 schools, early childhood education facilities, and institutes of higher education, end quote. The updated CDC recommendations on prevention measures will be based on the new COVID-19 community level. Tomorrow morning, superintendents have been asked to participate in a conference call with representatives of the Connecticut Department of Public Health and the Connecticut Department of Education, and I will update the community as appropriate later in the week. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board has at this time.
Board members, any questions? I'm not going to go around. We're going to try to move this along, so just shout out if you have a question. Okay, Jonathan, I think you can move on.
Thank you. Turning to our main presentation of the evening, which you can find in Board Book, entitled Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Woodbridge School District. I'm going to be joined, and mostly these people, the members of the community, some members of the Community and Diversity Committee will have the leading roles in this presentation. But I want to set the stage first by saying that the district has had a commitment for many years to ensuring that every member of the community feels safe, secure, and welcome at Beecher Road School. At its core, diversity, equity, and inclusion are about working the hardest we can to ensure that every member of the community feels that they belong. And to use a word Mr. Brooks used a few moments ago, that every member of the community feels that they are affirmed. So this evening, some members of our Community and Diversity Committee will present 7 aspects of the ongoing work of the district in this regard. And I want to observe that we had some members of the board very legitimately interested in seeing the survey results of every question. And because when we get to the survey, we had some complex multi-part questions on 3 surveys, there are many slides. But when we get to that part of the presentation, Ms. Sherman, who will be presenting then, is going to highlight main themes. But in order to get into this, I'd like to share my screens. Just a moment, please. Erin, you're on my screen. Can you see that? Thank you. We can talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and affirmation in many ways. But for this presentation, at least, we have 7 ways to talk about it. through overall diversity statistics of looking at our district, through some subgroup analysis applied to key district metrics, looking at some curriculum and professional development related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have a special student group at the 6th grade extracurricular level SEEDS and the student involvement of that group. We then will present the recent DEI survey and speak about that. There is work at the town of Woodbridge level related to DEI. We'll have some presentation of that, and we'll offer some thoughts for ongoing work. The Board of Education established as District Goal 2 that there would be this year a survey related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and using that to set some benchmarks for moving forward. And that's the key goal reason we're doing this. But the more basic reason is, to the extent we can do a better job of any individual member of our community feeling that they belong and are affirmed in our community, we need to do that. And this sets some benchmarks for that. In the diversity statistics, and some people get very interested in the statistics and other people say get to the more interesting student-centered part of the presentation. But I'll put these up here to illustrate that over the past 20 years, looking at intervals at 5-year basis, you can see that the demographic of the Beecher Road community has changed. Now, it's changed in a few ways. I would represent to you that an interesting column to look at is the rightmost column. That's the total minority. These are statistical classifications used by the State Department of Education, not developed by Woodbridge, and any district has these metrics. So based on the official Connecticut statistics, we've moved over 20 years from a total minority population here at Beecher of under 13% to over 33%. There's another diversity statistic that is not based upon racial minority, and that's free and reduced price meals. That's the next to rightmost column. That has significantly grown. And so you might say that eligibility for free and reduced price meals is one indication of socioeconomic need. And that has moved from under 4% 20 years ago to over 13%. I will say that about 10 years ago, there was a slight recalculation in how the federal government determined eligibility for free and reduced price lunch. So the increase happened at all districts across at least Connecticut, but still there's a growing socioeconomic diversity. On the next slide, you see how those numbers that were presented from a racial minority perspective compare Woodbridge in the main column on the left and then the state of Connecticut on the right. And this mirrors, if you look at the state of Connecticut column, that the state of Connecticut population from a student perspective is diverse. Interestingly, we also, and these numbers are available for every district, there's a site at the bottom, have teacher racial demographic comparisons here. And we'll be talking a little bit about personnel later in the presentation, but I'll observe that the state of Connecticut also has goals set at the state educational level for diversifying the teacher and the staff workforce to make sure that we have the best quality staff and are representing the communities that we serve and that the communities our students will enter in the future. This data is from last year, which is what the state has currently updated. And finally, from a more global perspective, we also have a 5-year interval comparison on teachers and students here in Woodbridge. And you'll see the growth there in terms of our faculty who are classified as racially diverse. And then that rightmost column of students, the 12.8 to the 33.6, matches what you saw on a previous slide. The final often benchmarked indicator of diversity is multi-language status. That is, and I will say this used to be called English learners, English language learners. The terminology changes, but right now it's moved to multilingual learners to respect that people who can speak, read, write, listen in more than one language actually have advantages right, in education and in the world. So multilingualism, whether English or another language is your first, that's actually a great advantage. Right now, this classification is 3.3% of our population, 27 of our learners. And 10 years ago, it was 2% with 15 students, and we had a slightly smaller population at the time. So there's growth in this area as well. There's complexity to this population because the 27 students represent a variety of different languages. And Ms. Huntington, who's a key member of our Community and Diversity Committee, and is our multilingual learner teacher, she has recently provided staff professional development that was very well received on teaching the integrated across our school K-6 and also in our preschool population. This segment one of the presentation is the kind of umbrella view, if you will, and interesting to some of you, less interesting to others. But Ms. Sherman and Ms. Kiesel are going to observe what's been analyzed from a subgroup level. And we've been, for the past several months, marking certain metrics more for the board and for the population. And they're going to use these to talk about how those metrics can be analyzed by subgroups. So I'm going to move to the next slide, hopefully mute myself successfully, and Ms. Sherman will speak about first student attendance statistics.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for allowing me to be with you tonight to be a part of this important presentation. So I wanted to start by talking briefly about student attendance statistics. And you'll notice that our numbers are small. And since our subgroup is so small, we did actually lump together chronically absent students and truant students just to protect our students' identities. So we lumped those two together, and you'll notice that the numbers are there for K-3 to 4 to 6, and that is current data as of February 13th, 2022. I will mention on this slide, and it says it right there on the slide, but our subgroup analysis, as we looked at this small subgroup of our population, it does indicate that the population is disproportionately male and disproportionately recipients of free and reduced lunch. So that is something that we are looking at and continuing to track as we move forward throughout the school year. Moving on to student discipline statistics, and I want to first point out that the data from the in-school referrals is from November 1st until February 25th. And the reason that we started in November 1st was because of the Safe School Climate Committee. This was a suggestion. This tracking form was a suggestion from that committee, and it was developed by members of our Safe School Climate Committee. And the data has since been tracked and reviewed periodically throughout the process of collecting it. So that is the first date, and the bus disciplinary referrals is the same process that we have used for many years here at Beecher, and that data is to date from September until February 25th. And as again, we looked at those numbers, we noticed that there was not really any gaps in free and reduced or gender or race or ethnicity. So those numbers were about even. I'm now going to turn it over to Ms. Kiesel to talk about the next two slides.
Thank you so much for letting me join you. I'll be speaking about the bullying and harassment statistics. And in looking at the data, you can see that it's a little bit higher in the upper grades, but we did the analysis and it doesn't reveal any disproportionality in our information for the students. Go to the next one. And this is our special education identification and referral. And we did find some disproportionality on this for based on race and free and reduced lunch classification. Just to understand how students are identified, we use state criteria in determining if a student is eligible for special education services. And that, you're looking at the criteria to see if a student is eligible. And if a student moves into district and they're already eligible for special education, we need to honor that and follow their current IEP. So it's a little background to understand that.
Okay, sorry for that little muting problem. Briefly, for a slide on attention, diversity, equity, and inclusion in hiring, I believe everybody on this, or most everybody on the call anyway, is aware that we moved as a district to online application software just about a year ago. And one of the reasons we did that is to ensure the broadest collection of data related to applicants, to objective review of applications, and then to add a question, by the way, to the applications, asking applicants about how they, for example, if they're a teacher or an administrator, how they will ensure attention to each and every student's particular uniqueness in their role. And we are able, through the online application process, to collect information if applicants choose to share it related to two categories from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The first is gender, the second is race, ethnicity. Interview committees are seeking to hire recommend for hire the strongest candidate for each job. But at the district level, we were able to track this data to see the extent to which it meets our goals for diversity in applicants. You'll notice from both of these categories, gender and race, ethnicity, a fair amount of applicants do not respond. The gap in female to male for gender is not surprising because that mirrors a gap that exists in terms of applicants for teaching and non-teaching education jobs. The race ethnicity, if you exclude the no response other category, this indicates both area of strength and areas we can keep growing at. This is, as I say, a goal for the entire state right now is to diversify the education workforce. It is complicated by the fact there's a statewide national shortage in terms of applicants at all for jobs. I will also say that this information represents all applicants for positions, but sometimes there are qualifications required for positions such as teacher certification in certain areas that are not met by applicants for the positions. All right, in our overview of a variety of topics related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm pleased to turn it back to Lisa, who's going to speak about segment 3 with some help from some of our excellent teachers. Curriculum and professional development related to DEI.
Thank you. And I actually am so pleased to be joined by Larissa Krocko and Katie McCullum, our two librarians, and they're going to talk very briefly about some of the work that they are doing in the library space.
Good evening, everyone. So Mrs. McCollum and I have really tried to create a student-centered, student-affirming space and disseminate that information throughout the school as much as we can. I know that this list might seem as though it's a holidays and hero list, but again, we're striving to create robust discussions where students interact meaningfully, and we're really using Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop's research where she talks about children needing windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. So what that might look like, for example, is with our white table ceremony during Veterans Day. Not all students have parents who served, but we read the book and we had the whole white table set up where all of our library classes came in and participated in a solemn ceremony where they understood the importance of honoring our veterans and those who are no longer with us who served, and understanding the symbolism of each piece from the bitter salt to the empty chair. Another example would be we did a Lunar New Year story walk that the whole school could engage in that told the story, and then children were able to locate the year they were born and see what their Chinese zodiac animal would be. We're hoping next year to expand that to every year add another Asian country's Lunar New Year story. And we did an African American history walk, and again, with that one, we were very mindful of getting as many faces and biographies as possible and things that kids could relate to. For instance, Mari Kopenny, who was a young activist in Flint, Michigan to get clean water. So we're moving beyond the traditional figures to ensure that everybody gets to see who they want to see themselves and to see others, just like what Dr. Rudine Sims Bishops promotes. So we're hoping to keep this up, and also kind of adjacent to this, we're really weaving in, mindfully looking at what books we're suggesting for book club books for students to use with their teachers in English language arts. In that case, we're trying to emphasize books that have diverse family structures, such as single parents, same gender parents, adopted family members, some families where they're new to the United States, immigrant stories, making sure that we're allowing our children to read the world, as it were, and experience that. Thank you.
Thank you, Larissa. I want to just add on to what Larissa said by mentioning that this ends up being a little bit of an assured experience for our students, which is a really beautiful opportunity for all of our students to engage in the work that they're doing in the library. So I just wanted to tack that on. Moving on to some of our professional developments for staff. I would like to just mention that there is a list here on your screen of some of the work that we have done, but this is really highlighting some of our bigger days, some of our full day or half day professional development. And in addition to the work that you see highlighted on your screen, I will say that faculty meetings, which are shorter periods of time, but still opportunities to engage in conversations and article review or conversations as a PLC, as a grade level group, or as a mixed grade level group, and opportunities to learn from one another and to grow in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our instructional practices. That does happen throughout the faculty meetings, in addition to the days that are listed here on your screen. I also want to mention that, generally speaking, the feedback that we receive after these days of learning and work for our staff is often that teachers and staff really are looking for even more opportunities to continue to learn and grow, which is a really powerful message. I think that we all recognize that this work is ongoing and that we are all on our own individual journeys, and that we are all just trying to do the very best we can to continue to learn and grow and support our students and support our community the best way that we can by continuing to learn and grow ourselves. So I do appreciate that the community that I am so blessed to be a part of is really eager to continue to learn diversity, equity, and inclusion, and culturally responsive teaching, learning about race and education. So I just want to emphasize that point as well. We're moving on to our next segment, segment 4.
Who is supporting the grade 6.
So sorry.
Jonathan, we can't hear you.
Sorry. Oh boy, we're getting there. Okay, about that. Better? You can hear me?
We can hear you now, but we can't see if you're sharing your screen.
Oh boy, all right, so sorry. Just a moment. Better?
That's better, Jonathan. Thank you.
Ms. Franklin and Ms. Moore are two outstanding Beecher teachers who had the inspirational idea of working on a grade 6 extracurricular group related to issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I could describe it, but it's better from Ms. Franklin and Ms. Moore's perspective. And I'm pleased to give you a little bit of a cliffhanger to say part of their presentation over the next few slides will include a couple of Beecher students. And we're always proud to see some of our students participating. So take it away, Ms. Franklin.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak about seeds. But before I begin, I want to read a quote I kind of came across this weekend in my readings. It's in an essay entitled Nationalizing Education. It's dated 1916 by John Dewey, a world-renowned educational reformer. And in this book, it says, "The fact is, the genuine American, the typical American, is himself a hyphenated character. This does not mean that he is part American and that some foreign ingredient is then added. It means that, as I have said, he is international and interracial in his makeup. He is not American plus Pole or German, but American is himself Pole, German, English, French, Spanish, Italian, Greek, Irish, Scandinavian, Bohemian, Jew, and so on. The point is to see to it that the hyphen connects instead of separates. And this means that at least that our public schools shall teach each factor to respect every other, and shall take pains to enlighten all as to the great past contributions of every strain in our composite makeup. This statement that John Dewey said in 1916 kind of resonated with me, as it aligns with the goals that I have for Seeds and Seeds for Change, that no matter your background, cultural or racial ethnicity or gender identity, our differences is what makes us unique and should be honored and celebrated. And so Seeds for Change is a grant-funded program that I applied for in the spring of 2021 to allow students a space, regardless of their racial or gender identity, to learn about unsung heroes in history. And it's centered on Black history and social justice. So this work is important on many fronts. The first reason is that if we teach our children to appreciate our differences, whatever that may be, we work towards creating empathy and a greater appreciation of each other. So the second reason that this work is important, Jonathan, if you could go ahead and go to the next slide, is that research has found that being able to work with people from different backgrounds and perspectives has great economic impact. That our kids will be finding themselves working alongside people from all over the world, speaking different languages and representative of different gender identities. So if you could go to the previous slide, Jonathan, you skipped 2, I think, over there. There you go. Thanks. So diversity has been found to lead to innovation and to fuel actually financial growth. So learning how to engage in these conversations about race and differences not only acknowledges the differences of each individual in the space, but also helps to prepare our students to engage in conversations with alternate viewpoints and to work to reach consensus. So in the next slide, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of, Jonathan, if you can skip to the next slide. There you go. This one just outlines briefly kind of the curriculum that's been planned and that the students have been involved in. So phase 1, I call the I do phase, and they've already completed this. This is where they do the independent work of investigating an unsung hero. And then they took part in a jigsaw where they, quickly kind of like speed dating, where they rotated around and shared their experience about what they learned. And they got to indirectly learn about many other unsung heroes that their classmates learned about. And the phase 2 is what we're currently involved in, which is the We Do, which is where they work with a partner to learn about a certain topic that has occurred in history. And what they will be doing is presenting and teaching the rest of the class about that particular topic or social issue. And we will eventually get into phase 3, which is the They Do phase, which involves students in groups where they will engage in debates regarding social issues topics. Now, I would like to take this moment to, hopefully they're on with me and they're gonna get prepared to unmute themselves, but I wanna introduce you to 2 students who are members of Seeds to share why they joined and also why they feel being a part of Seeds has been important to them. So first to speak will be Eitan, who will then be followed by Vilas. So Eitan, if you're with us, you can unmute and go ahead.
Hi, my name is, hello members of the board, my name is Eitan, and I'm a 6th grade student of Seeds. When I joined Seeds for Change, it helped me to learn more about LGBTQIA, and it helped me to learn about how to talk about identity differences and also helped me learn about Black history. I have a friend who's Black and another who's gender fluid. I joined Seeds because of them so I could deepen my understanding and try to connect with them more. And then leading me through this is Miss Franklin, who is South Korean, and this is important because in the first 6 years of Beecher, I did not have I didn't have a teacher who wasn't Caucasian, and this is the first year I've had actually 2 teachers who weren't Caucasian, Miss Glennon, who was Ecuadorian, and Miss Franklin, who's South Korean. And then Seeds for Change has now taught me about how to just respect people, talk about LGBTQ, and how to be just respectful in Black history. Thank you. I would now like to welcome Velas.
Hi. Hello, members of the board. My name is Velasmin Artovich. I am a 6th grade student and a SEEDS member. For me, SEEDS is a really important part of my education since it mainly teaches empathy, acceptance, and compassion. It showed me how we are all different but equally important and all deserve respect even though we have our own histories and backgrounds. In SEEDS, we recently learned about the concept of color blindness. If someone says they are colorblind, they mean that they can't see the color of someone's skin, culture, and background. Theoretically, this could be a good thing, but it neglects the fact that a lot of people are proud of their skin color and culture and want to be recognized for everything they are. For example, you might or might not be able to see that I am of mixed race. I am 50% Indian and 50% Polish, but I'm 100% American, born and raised in Connecticut. With my mom being Indian and my dad being Polish, I celebrate a lot of different traditions, eat foods from different sides of the globe, and get the best of all 3 worlds. I am proud to be intercultural and interracial. To me, this is something I want people to know me for, and it's pretty cool to me. Not a lot of people have parents that are from different cultural and ethnic backgrounds, so it is cool to me that I've been brought up like this. This is one of the reasons why I would like people to acknowledge me for all of me. SEEDS emphasizes the need to be caring, respectful to all others, and teaches about racial equality and how we need to learn about our history, even the parts that may not have been taught to us till now. If the seeds of our caring mindset are planted in elementary school now, we will all grow to be strong trees and a better society. Thank you for letting both Eitan and I speak.
Thank you, Eitan and Velas. So in the next slide, I just wanted to share with you a final kind of image of what happened last week, February 24th on Thursday. We had a visit by Amity students who joined us and took part in a student panel and really just authentically shared from their perspective, being students of color and also allies, how our Beecher students could be advocates and more knowledgeable about who they are and also embrace who they are, and how to reach to other students for support and other adults for support in doing the advocacy work. So first on the panel, I will just mention is Keziah, who is a senior and a president of the Black Student Union, who is also joined by Sage, who is a senior and a co-president of the Black Student Union. And Sage was as a MAG alum and also a Beecher alum. And joined with them was Nina Carmelli, who is also a MAG alum, and she's the co-founder and president of Inclusion at Amity. And then we also had Isabel, who's also a junior and a member of Inclusion at Amity. And she came to us from Bethany as an alum from Bethany Community School. And Sam, who is a sophomore, he's actually at the far left corner up there on the right image. And he comes to us as a sophomore and a member of Inclusion at Amity and an alum of Turkey Hill School in Orange. We then were also Alex, is a freshman and a member of Inclusion at Amity and an alum of MAG and Beecher. And Hannah as well, and she's our last one I'm going to mention. She's a freshman and a member of Inclusion at Amity, an alum of Beecher as well. So I want to just share as a final closing note is that the insight of the Amity students provided to our students just a simple and clear message that this work that addresses diversity and inclusion should happen early. They told our students they wish they had this shared experience when they were in elementary school. Thank you very much. So this is the second picture. They took part in games and activities with us and just were so excited to be a part of this. And they will be students who will join us at our faculty PD on March 18th as well.
I can just take a moment before we go to segment 5 to say that Eitan and Velas, you make us all very proud. I know that coming to a Board of Education meeting might seem maybe intimidating or probably not high on your list of things to do. We don't take that personally, but you are an excellent reflection of so many students at Beecher, and you have so many great possibilities ahead of you. So you stay on the meeting as long as you want to, but I wanted to say you're very, very proud of you.
Thank you.
So I want to move with the team to the more detailed discussion of the recent Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion survey results. And this again aligns with the board's second district goal for the year. I'm going to just set the scene briefly, and then Lisa's going to take it away. Our Community and Diversity Committee worked on the best timeline for implementing this. And of course, we were not implementing this in the fall because there were so many contingencies based on what was happening with COVID at the time that to get in with a particular survey on a particular topic seemed like not a good time. But the past 4 weeks was a better time. And our focus and purpose for all three surveys, student, parent, guardian, and staff, was to get feedback about how some types of diverse learners are included in our community. And the survey was not comprehensive about all types of diversity, but about some. The committee determined what the participant groups would be. It did determine that grades 5 and 6 students were the best to survey at this time, and also that the parents of those students would make sense, as well as the full staff. The committee looked at a lot of different options for the survey itself. The Panorama Company, which you're familiar with, does many of our surveys, offered a DEI option, but the committee determined that was a little limited. Then there was a Canadian model that actually is used by many, maybe all school districts in Canada, but that was copyrighted. And so for that, as well as other reasons, we came up with our own. We received feedback from grades 5 and 6 teachers, particularly on topics and language of the survey to make sure that it would seem accessible to our range of students in grades 5 and 6. We also participated in a small pilot with students and got some additional feedback on some wording that needed to be refined. We then administered the survey based on the Pupil Rights Amendment. We solicited parent opt-in for students to participate and got almost 2/3 of students to participate at grades 5 and 6. And we did have an option at the end of the survey for students if there were any follow-ups that they wanted to have. If completing the survey had brought up ideas that they wanted to speak to a administrator or member of the wellness team about, there was that option as a final question. And we won't obviously be sharing individual student concerns, but I know Lisa will support that some the good follow-up meetings were held with her and a member of our wellness team in the school psychology department. Lisa was present for the administration of all the student surveys, and so she's the best one to take this away.
Thank you. So I'm going to just tell you that there is a lot of data that I will be sharing with you. Some of the slides, like the first couple that we're starting with, stand for themselves, and I won't really be referencing them. And then other slides, I will be just showing some highlights, highlighting some themes for you. So the very first couple slides are really just about the grade and gender and race of the students. I want to mention, it's really important to mention actually that for the students that the gender and the race questions were optional questions. So the students did not have to answer that, and we made that very clear to them. They were asked to just identify the grade that they were in, but then the next two questions about their gender and their race were optional questions. I also just want to mention that, like I said, there is a lot of data. The Community Diversity Committee is reviewing this data, as is the administrative team, and we all continue to really be motivated by what we are learning and excited about the work moving forward. So moving on to the next section after that is the students at Beecher talking about their feelings, listening to one another about what people are trying to say, working out their disagreements, and again, working with teachers to solve their disagreements. I'm lumping all of those questions together because overall, the feedback that we really received based on all of those results is that many students feel as if more than 50% on all of those questions of our students really feel as if students are talking to one another. They understand the value of that work. They understand the value of listening to one another. And they do believe that their teachers are helping them to have those conversations and do that work. So I kind of lumped all those questions together. Moving forward, there are several questions related to learning experiences of our students. So the questions revolve around learning about people of different races, ethnicities, or skin colors, people from different countries, people of different religions or faith, people with different learning disabilities or differences, people who make different amounts of money. And again, the survey revealed that many of our students are experiencing learning opportunities around those topics. And we will say that the areas that we noticed were in areas of need were learning about people with learning disabilities and differences and people who make different amounts of money. Those two areas in our survey did sort of arise as areas where we spend less time on learning opportunities compared to the other questions. Moving along, there are some questions for our students to answer about how often they see, hear, or learn about diverse groups of people in each of the following categories. One is around books, one is around posters and pictures, one is around videos, and one is around classwork and homework. Now, overall, many of our students felt as if in the beginning categories that I just referenced, books and posters and videos and classwork, that there is a fair amount of exposure to people of diverse groups of people from different races, ethnicities, and backgrounds. But in our homework area, we noticed that there was less opportunities for our students to engage in that kind of work. Now, this may vary by grade level, but since we only did study grade 5 and grade 6, that's who we were hearing from the most. So again, moving forward, the next question was around how students feel that they are being treated by other kids at Beecher Road School. And I want to highlight here that about 69% of our students felt as if they were treated pretty much the same as all of the other students, which, you know, that feels like a pretty good number, although we do acknowledge that there is definitely some work to do, where some students, 9.7% indicated worse and 5.8% indicated better than others. Now, moving forward, if a student, the next question, if a student answered that they felt that they were treated better or worse, they were able to indicate why they thought they were treated better or worse. And this graph is showing the results of that survey. Now, I want to point out that many students did say that they weren't really sure as to why they were treated better or worse, but for even one student to say that they felt that they were treated better or worse because of their race or ethnicity, or because even of their grades or test scores, which interestingly, grades and test scores was an area that was highlighted throughout this survey. It does seem to be an area that students identified as an area of improvement, and you can see that on this graph. But even if one student feels that they are treated better or worse for any of these reasons, it means that we as a community still have work to do to support our students moving forward. So although this was answered only by some of the respondents from the previous question, it does indicate that we do have some work to do as a community. The next couple of questions are about adults at Beecher. So this is the student perspective on how adults treat students at Beecher. So the question is, how much do you agree that adults at Beecher treat students fairly, regardless of each of the following? Now, the questions are around race, ethnicity, or skin color, their first language or accent, their religion or faith, their grades or test scores, whether or not they have learning differences or disabilities, and how much money their families have, how they look or dress, and where they live. So some of the same themes that were evidenced in some of the other questions that we have answered. And I will say that overall, our students, our BRS students, do feel that adults treat students fairly. Again, you know, there's always room to grow, but the large majority of students responding to that question do feel that the adults at Beecher treat students fairly based on all of those different categories. Now, a student who answered that they don't feel the school rules are applied fairly to them, they had to think about why that might be. And the next question is relating to that. And you'll notice that the highest graph areas are in the I don't know and the other. Now, this question, you know, as we looked at this question, we really felt as if we needed to dig into it a little bit more. And we really needed to have some individual conversations with students to think through why do they feel that they are treated differently or better or worse, and what's happening, what experiences are they having here at Beecher, and what can we as a learning community do to support those students. So this question was definitely a question that we felt that we needed to dig into a little bit more. As I move on, the very last question that our students responded to was around bullying. And you'll notice there that in the question, we did actually define what bullying meant for students. And we asked them to share with us if they had observed any students being bullied or harassed at Beecher. Now, again, just like I said before, any student that answers that they feel they are bullied for any of these reasons is unacceptable to us and illustrates that there is work that we need to continue to do as a learning community to support all of our students. I will mention that, as Cheryl had pointed out earlier in the presentation, there are bullying investigations that occur, and we are continuing to do that work as a leadership team and continuing to ensure that we are completing those investigations promptly and making sure that we have appropriate follow-up with all of the students involved. But we don't want any of our students to feel that they are bullied for any of these reasons. So that's the conclusion of the student survey. I hope you're still bearing with me. I know that there is a lot of information that I'm sharing with you. I'm moving on now into the parent guardian survey. And you'll notice that we have about 119 respondents. So again, the first couple of slides, you can very easily see the 5th and 6th grade breakdown. As Jonathan mentioned, only 5th and 6th grade parents took this. The gender and the race question are next and also were optional. And then we move into the question about how parents feel their child is treated by other children at Beecher. And again, you'll notice that many parents feel as if their child is treated the same as others. One of the themes that we noticed in the parent responses is that the I don't know category was often a larger slice of our pie graph here than in the students. So that is something that we observed throughout the parent responses. The results of the parent guardian survey about their child being treated fairly, we did ask the parents to identify why they felt their child was treated differently. And as we look at that bar graph, you'll notice that the race ethnicity bar is the largest. And again, as I said before, we don't want any child or any parent to feel that their child is treated differently. And what this illustrates is that we've done some work and we have more to do and more areas to grow in this area, in this specific topic and area. Moving forward, the next parent guardian section is about how adults at Beecher are treating the students at Beecher regardless of the following. And again, this is just like the student, it is broken down into race, ethnicity, or skin color, their first language or accent, their religion or faith, their grades or test scores, whether or not they have learning differences or disabilities, how much money their families have, how they look or dress, and where they live. Now, again, I want to mention that the I don't know piece of the pie graph here is definitely larger with the parent responses, and many parents So overall, many parents do feel that most students are treated fairly, regardless of any of those categories, other than the I don't know section. The next question is about the school rules and whether or not they are applied fairly to their child. And again, similar to the student response, about 86.5% of our parents did say that they felt as if school rules were applied fairly to their child. So many parents and guardians, that matched what our students reported, where there was a larger percentage of students and parents that felt as if school rules were applied fairly. If a parent answered no to that previous question, again, just like students, we asked them to let us know why they felt that. And the I don't know bar, so this is what I mentioned earlier, the I don't know bar is the highest. So many parents said that they didn't know why their child was, why the rules were not applied fairly to their child. And then the second highest, you'll notice, is their child's race or ethnicity, and the other bar. So again, this is a question that we'd have to dig into a little bit more and gather some more information. Moving forward, the next question is around bullying. And once again, we did define that. And we asked parents to share with us why, if they felt that their child was being bullied or if they were aware of any bullying. Now, compared to the students, I will say that there was more concern from the parents and guardians about bullying around race, ethnicity, or skin color. And when we looked at that, that was obviously incredibly concerning to us and did not quite match up with what the students were reporting, but coming from the parents and the guardians, it was something that jumped out to us right away as an area that we have to focus in on and as an area that parents were expressing some significant concern around. So that's the end of the parent survey. And now I'm moving on to the staff survey. And you'll see that it was about 69 staff members who did respond to this survey. The very first chart lets you know their role within the organization. And again, the first question is about how often do students talk about the importance of understanding their own feelings and the feelings of others. Now, similar to the students, where the next few questions, students at Beecher work on understanding and listening to one another and working out disagreements. Similar to what the students said, the staff really reported that actually, the staff even reported higher percentages of students talking and listening to one another and working out their disagreements. But we did find that the student and the staff information really matched, where there was an overall feeling that our students are talking with one another, they are listening to one another, they're trying to work out their disagreements with one another. And the staff numbers, like I said, were a little bit higher in this area, but it did match with what the students were reporting as well. The next question is about, the next few questions are about teachers helping to resolve disagreements, and then moving into the learning experience of students. And you'll notice again that teachers are reporting on learning about people of different races, ethnicities, or skin colors, learning about people from different countries, learning about people from different religions or faiths, similar to the students, learning about people with learning differences or disabilities, and learning about people who make different amounts of money. And once again, the staff responses meshes beautifully and matches and confirms that the student responses on these sets of questions, in that there is more work to be done around different amounts of money, especially that one popped for us with the staff, and people with learning differences or disabilities were the two areas. Similar to students, the staff were also asked about how often students see, hear, or learn about diverse groups of people at school in books, posters and pictures, videos, classwork, and homework. And as I mentioned with the students, the homework was the area that we really identified from the student perspective as needing more work in this area, and the staff responses also matches again what the student responses are. So the staff responses do feel as if there's less learning about diverse groups of people during homework time. And the next section, again, mimics what the students reported, which is that how much do you agree that adults at Beecher treat students fairly regardless of each of the following: race, ethnicity, or skin color, their first language or accent, their religion or faith, their grades or test scores, whether or not they have learning differences or disabilities, how much money their families have, and how they look or dress, and where they live. Most staff felt that the adults treat students fairly, similar to what the students and the parents actually reported. So again, overall, the strongly agree section for all of those areas were larger, although I will say that we do recognize that there is some work to dive into some of these results to make sure that we really analyze how adults are treating their students and which areas we felt like we need to focus on a little bit more. But the staff, as I mentioned, do feel that adults treat students fairly, similar to the students and the parents. Again, staff were asked to think about bullying, similar to what parents and students were asked. And the staff actually reported more concern about bullying around learning differences or disabilities and how students look or dress. So those bars on our bar graph were definitely higher from our staff reporting. There was a significant number of staff saying that they didn't know or reporting out on the other. So once again, this is a question that we definitely have to dive into a little bit more and unpack some of that work around the other category and also the learning differences and disabilities and how students look or dress. So that was a lot of data, and I appreciate you hanging with me. And I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan, who will now introduce segment 6.
I'm supposed to be the neutral MC to move from one segment to the next. But since I gave credit to Eitan and Vilas at the end of that, outstanding presentation of the survey results. This is excellent. I am very pleased to ask if she's on the call, and I believe she is. Dr. Mahini Raghunathan is our one of 2 representatives from our district's Community and Diversity Committee to the Town of Woodbridge Ad Hoc Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, which was started about 1.5 years ago. And there's some powerful synthesis work happening between the 2, although there are some goals that differ as well. So Mohini, are you there, please?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. So if I can ask you to speak to the next slides, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you, Jonathan, for having me on here, and thanks to everyone who's listening in. So I will very briefly tell you a little bit about the Town Ad Hoc Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and the work that's ongoing. There are several parents from Beecher who are members of this Town Ad Hoc Committee, and I think that really reflects the culture that is growing at Beecher and our commitment to this work. So the Town Ad Hoc Committee is about 1.5 years old. It's chaired by Ellen Skeletor, and the vice chair is our own Tehera Pervez, who is a parent at Beecher and also a member of the Beecher Community Diversity and Inclusion Committee. The highlights of the work from the Town Ad Hoc Committee include the Woodbridge Like Me Day that you may remember from last fall. It was a beautiful, vibrant day with a really multicultural presence. There's a picture on the slide with the reading corner that was hosted by the Beecher Road School library, and it was really a wonderful opportunity. Next slide, please. So this year, we have kickstarted the year with a community book read called Mosaic. We had our very first book read earlier last week, and the book we read was the 1619 Project. We hope that this will be a way for us to really connect and learn and grow, relying on such a wide array of diverse books. There will be an upcoming survey that will be released soon, next month. And the survey pertains to living and experiencing Woodbridge. I particularly want to thank Dr. Budd for being very supportive of the town initiatives. And I want to point out that when I started attending the town ad hoc committee meetings, it was really evident, and the leadership there would point out that Beecher is leading the way. So I'm excited to be involved in initiatives on both ends. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Mohini. We are near the end of this presentation, but the seventh segment is on some thoughts for ongoing work, which are generative themes coming from the Community and Diversity Committee, as well as the administration. And Lisa's had enough time to get a drink of water, and she's going to take the first few bullets, and I'll take the last few.
Yes, I definitely took a big sip of water after that. So as I mentioned, we are all on our own journey. New staff have arrived at Beecher. We're so lucky about that, but it does mean that some of the work that we've done in the past is work that we need to continue to do. And just in general, we're all growing and learning as our population does continue to change, as those statistics that were presented at the beginning indicate. So we all know that there is a lot of work for us to do as a learning community based on the survey results, based on the work that we've done, based on the feedback that we've gotten from our staff. So I will say that one of the areas that stood out to us, as I reported on the attendance statistics, is really focusing in on the groups that were represented disproportionately on those attendance statistics, and digging into that and the special education statistics that Cheryl shared earlier as well, and thinking about what work can we do to support all of our students in our community, but especially the ones that are represented disproportionately in both attendance and special education. So that is work and learning and training that we will engage in as a learning community. We also continue, and Larissa did such a wonderful job sharing the work that her and Katie McCollum are doing in the library, but we are continuing to have conversations about school-wide lessons and activities that we can do, not only for Black History Month, but Women's History Month, for all of the many different celebrations and ways that we can bring the world into our little slice of the world here at Beecher Road School, and making sure that there are some assured experiences for all of our students. And that is ongoing, and that is work that we are continuing to develop and grow from. And, I want to point out too, that although we talk about Black History Month, and we talk about Women's History Month, and we talk about all these special areas and times and celebrations and cultures, we also recognize as a community that we shouldn't just celebrate Black History Month during the month of February, that this is work that is ongoing, that we should be celebrating and honoring and learning about people of different races, ethnicities, and backgrounds all year long. And I'm really glad that Larissa mentioned the notion of windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors, because that drives a lot of our work all year long, not just during those specialized months. We also believe that we have to do ongoing curriculum work. That is actually one of our school goals, and something that we will continue to work on in both social studies and language arts. And again, literature is one very powerful way that we drive our diversity, equity, and inclusion work forward. Sharing picture books with students, sharing chapter books with our older readers, making sure our book club books are representing a variety of cultures and communities is just one way that we continue to do this work, and that we know we need to keep growing in. And then ongoing professional development. As I mentioned, our staff are responsive and eager. They are continuing to grow and learn. The feedback that we receive from them often, and we will collect feedback after our upcoming March PD, but often we hear from them that they would like more professional development and more learning opportunities. So that is ongoing and continual, and it is work that we will seek out and continue to offer to all of our staff members. So that is some of our future anticipated focus areas.
The last four bullets on this slide, I don't think will be any surprise to you all based on the previous remarks we've made. But as Mohini mentioned, Beecher is not an island. We're part of a larger community. And to the extent that we can collaborate with the town DEI committee as appropriate, we will continue to do so. The next bullet is so important, I'm going to read it straightforward. Pursuing the needs of each and every Beecher Road School community member who does not yet feel they belong, And that's where I think Lisa said it very eloquently. Even where we see those survey results where responses are very strong, we say where somebody has felt bullied because of one of these incidents, where somebody has felt that we're not giving enough attention to certain distinct groups and to certain uniqueness. We can and we will do a better job. We know more about this topic than we did 10 or 20 years ago. There's a personal journey involved in this kind of work for everybody. I'm in a superintendent's network related to leading districts through this kind of work. Lisa is attending professional development that involves principals and school-based leaders. Our teachers are committed to working to make every single student feel special, and we extend that to the adult members of our community as well. On the next to last bullet on this slide benchmarks that last spring, the Board of Education began looking at the policy committee level at a policy related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, but wanted to expand the conversation based on getting some more data, which is really the point we're at now. And our district goal, second district goal for the year, indicates that this policy will be developed based on some of the survey feedback. So there are some members of our Community and Diversity Committee quite interested in the policy development. I believe it would be shepherded through the board's policy committee and be back at the board later this spring. And finally, we want to make sure, this relates a little bit to the bullying and harassment topic, but in general to the proactive aspects of DEI work, that we are publicizing to the greatest extent possible the great quilt, the great fabric of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and affirmation of everybody in our community. And there's a way in which at some point the principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and affirmation should filter through all of the work we do and ultimately not only be a separate presentation. So we're highlighting the work tonight, but this is important to every fabric of what we do, which is frankly why the presentation is a little bit lengthy, because it touches so many important aspects of what we do. So Lynn, I'm gonna finally stop sharing my screen, and it's been a pleasure for us all to present to you. Happy to take any questions, of course.
Jonathan, thank you very much. I just want to start by thanking the entire committee for their work, the administrators who participated in this presentation, which was comprehensive, informative, inclusive, just amazing work that you've done. And you've done it during a time where there's been a lot of other stuff going on, so very much appreciated. So I thank you. The student participation, the faculty participation, the parent participation, it's really such an important piece of the work that we do here. And so thank you very much for that. So I'll start with Maria, if you have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Lynn. I don't have any questions at the moment. I do want to echo the thanks for that very comprehensive and informative presentation, both our administration, to the committees, and to our students here who really gave us a sense of what it feels like to be participating in this work. And, you know, I would just say in relation to the slide about the needs going forward, to definitely keep communicating with the board what those needs are with regards to professional development and how we can best support the administration and the students and all of the families in this community, both with policy to make sure that bullying and harassment are appropriately addressed and appropriately in an age appropriate way for our pre-K through 6th district. And also to support all of the families so everyone does feel as though they have a seat at the table here at Beecher.
Thank you, Maria. Jay, do you have any questions or comments this evening?
I just want to thank the committee. I wanted to thank Jonathan, Lisa, Cheryl, Kim, Larissa, Dr. Ranganathan, and Vilas and Eitan for an excellent presentation. They reminded me again of why we should celebrate our differences. We should promote them, recognize them. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a fabric, as Jonathan mentioned, of our community. And I think that's a very, very strong statement. And I listened very carefully to both young men, and it was, mind-boggling to me that they could stand here and talk to us about issues that are very complex. But at the same time, what I took away from that is that what I hear many times is the issues on diversity, equity, and inclusion take away from other parts of the curriculum. And what I was grateful to hear is Lisa commented that we were building this into the curriculum. And what I saw from the SEEDS program is this is built into the curriculum. And so what I take away from this is what I saw tonight is this ability to communicate, to resolve conflict and disagreements. For me, these are a core competency that we want our students to walk away with. And they build upon what they're doing in the classroom and in the curriculum. So there's no way this is taken away from anything. This is actually enriching our community and enriching our students. And hopefully the parents on the call saw this when they saw the two young men do that excellent presentation. So I wanted to commend them, and I wanted to commend the people for providing such an excellent presentation. Thank you so much, Jonathan and the team.
Thanks, Jay. Brooke?
I do. Sorry, I had to write things down here. So I have a question. During the day, what percentage of the time and how much have you been able to integrate the DEI learning into the curriculum during the school day? So how much of that has already been integrated? And because we are kind of talking about budget cuts and whatnot, how much money is allocated towards the DEI? And do we need more or less? And if so, if there was a reduction in staff, would we stop with the DEI if we have to reduce a teacher or something for general education? I'm just wondering how much money, I guess, is put into the DEI trainings.
So, Brooke, thanks for that question. I will say to, as Jay pointed out, we are really working on integrating this work into our curriculum. So it is not a separate subject, but it is more in the fabric of the work that we do every single day. And when I say that, what I mean from a classroom perspective is, it might be as simple as reading a picture book about a famous historical person. And it might not be Rosa Parks or Martin Luther King, but it might be the story of a civil rights activist that the children don't know about as much. Or it might be reading about of course I'm blanking right now on some really wonderful.
I get it. So it's like 100% is going to be put in. 100% of the DEI will be put into the curriculum. So it flows together. It's not separated.
Exactly. That's a nice way to look at it. I will say that in literature and in social studies is probably where it comes out the most, but yes, I would say 100%. In terms of professional development, we do have a professional development budget. Sometimes we are able to engage in, like some of the professional development we've even done this year, it was directed by the professional development committee. So there was no cost beyond just the work and the hours and the time that we put in. If we ever ask an outside presenter to come in, then there is an associated cost with that. But much of the work is embedded in our professional development budget, or it is just done internally.
Could I add one thing to that? Could I add just one thing to that in relation to the budget for next year? The proposed operating budget from the board for additional support in the area of student wellness, for example, for social work, and that's essential to meet the complex needs of every student and to make sure that students who have more needs than others are able to get the attention. We've talked in other forums about the appropriate ratio of students to mental health support, and I would say that's an important part. in my judgment, I think many of your judgments, to the board's budget proposal too.
Thank you, Jonathan and Lisa. Brooke, are you set? Do you have
Yes,
anything
sir.
else, Brooke?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Erin?
Again, thank you for the presentation. I thought it was really great. I think as came out in the public comment earlier, we still have work to do for sure, as I think and as Jonathan and Lisa have said, it's an ongoing process. But I am encouraged that we're on a journey, and that even in the short time my kids have been at Beecher, I have seen growth in our ability to recognize that diversity is a really broad term and should be really broad and encompass the multitude of ways in which we are different from each other. But as the children said so eloquently, they want to be seen, and we want to be seen for who we are. So I really am encouraged by this effort, and that we continue to move forward in this area. I was shocked really by the number of parents that answered that survey. I think that has to be some of the best percentage-wise responses and engagement that we've ever gotten at a parent level. So that shows to me that parents are also really vested kind of in this work, and are excited to see this work for their kids. So I don't have any questions. I don't want to. I'm encouraged by what we're doing and encouraged by the results, and want to see us move forward. I also want to just acknowledge that for the child that was spoken about, that Darryl spoke about for Mr. Brooks's child, like that was a really devastating story, right? That was a really heartbreaking story. And so, even when there are, I think what that story and experience exemplifies is that even when the instances might be fewer, and then we want fewer instances, that when they do occur, they can be really profound for kids, and things that really impact kids. And so, yeah, just balancing and wanting us to balance the forward progress and some of the encouraging results with the fact that when there are issues related to racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, transphobia, that's really impactful on these kids and at such critical ages. So I know as the administrators, you're super aware of that, and just want to acknowledge that publicly as well. So thank you so much for everyone, for all of your work, for that really comprehensive presentation. And I look forward to supporting all of you as you guys move forward in this work.
Thanks, Erin. Sarah Beth?
I just have a few questions. One, going back to the parents' question about how the non-binary was presented to the children, how was that? If they didn't know what that was that explained to them, or?
We did not explain that to students. We read each question to them, so that was read to them, but we did not provide them with a definition.
Did students ask, did students ask, or?
They did not.
Okay.
I will say, if a student identifies as non-binary or agender, then they know it already, and they don't need me to explain to them how they identify. So the students that don't identify as that picked male or female if they chose to answer that question. So it did not require an explanation from myself.
Okay. Just one thing I noticed, it was interesting in the teacher responses that they varied so much in some of those questions about learning about diverse groups. Is it just because the curriculum is different for every grade? Like some teachers said once a year, maybe students were had something in a book or video or homework, and others said it was weekly. Coming from a student or a parent, you could understand because maybe kids they answer they don't realize they're learning something, but from a teacher, I would have expected a little more consistency, I guess, with that.
So I will say that our teaching staff includes everybody from our music teachers to our PE teachers to our third grade teachers to our sixth grade teachers. So the variability could be because of the different departments. So I would say that could be one explanation, but I do agree with you that that is something that we have to look at and think about what are some ways that we can integrate this work into all curricular areas, including all of our special areas and including all of our different classrooms. So yeah, that's really good feedback to notice, Sarah Beth, and I appreciate you pointing that out. And the only thing that we can think of to explain that might be just the differences in the departments and the grade levels.
Okay. And my last thing was, what are the, I might have missed this, but the next steps with the survey. So the DEI committee is taking the survey, and what is, like, where do you go from here, I guess? What are the plans?
So I think that there was a lot of data in here, right? So I do think that the committee needs some opportunities and time to dig into it even more and do some comparison across teacher. We were able to sort of highlight some of the comparisons between teachers, students, and parents, but I think doing some of that work will be really helpful. And then I know that I highlighted, and you just mentioned an area that we have to just dig into a little bit more. And so I think that the committee has to do a lot of that work and a lot of that processing and analysis first. And then I think that the next steps will be to think about what the next steps are. So how can we take all of this information and move the work forward and continue to learn and grow as a community? And then I think it's going to be really interesting to do this survey again with our students to think about if we want to change it at all, if we want to add more questions or take away questions. And that's obviously much further down the road, a year down the road. And then as we continue to administer a survey like this, track our growth as a community, see how we grow and change. And that's obviously several years down the road. So I think that there's sort of some shorter term things and some longer term work that will be done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Sarah Beth. Jeff?
Yes, thank you. It was really nice hearing from our students. It was a friendly reminder of why we're all here, so that is absolutely refreshing. One unfortunate byproduct of COVID is actually segregation with our students in cohorts and in the same classes. So I'd be interested to hear now how we would move forward from, the whole class assemblies to eating lunches together to the field trips. I think it's a huge important part of this conversation moving us forward. It might be during the COVID segment, but if you want to answer that now, I think it would help with this discussion.
So I'll start, and I know that will probably come up again later, but I will say that we are working through, as you all know, we are working through the mask mandate and that shift in our community. And our students will begin this Wednesday. They will begin mixing cohorts outside at recess. And the teachers actually, as I met and spoke with them, they requested a couple of days to talk to kids about what outside recess looks like when you get to mix cohorts again, and what that means in terms of how they play and how they interact with their peers, and really focusing on that aspect of kindness and inclusivity. So they wanted a couple of days to have those conversations with their students. But our very first thing that we are going to start is mixing grade level cohorts outside for recess. And then moving from there, after mask optional, we'll be continuing to take some steps to mix our students in different ways. Opening the cafeteria is definitely something that we want more fully opening, I should say, because we are using it, but more fully opening the cafeteria is another next step that we want to take as a community. But we're going to carefully measure those decisions based on what we're observing and what we're seeing and the feedback that we're getting from our entire community. So there's definitely work moving forward. Whole school assemblies, I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but we're looking definitely for ways that we can integrate our students and start mixing cohorts starting this Wednesday with recess.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Lisa.
Mike?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to apologize for being late to the meeting. It sounds like I missed some public comments that were important that I'm looking forward to looking back on and catching up on. I was able to hear the presentation and like others was very impressed, especially by the students, the young men who presented. Their level of poise and ability to communicate was very impressive to me. There's no way I would have been able to communicate that clearly at that age myself. Yes, like Jeff, it's a nice reminder of why we're here, and it's nice to see some of that on display. I also want to thank the administration for administering the survey and sharing the data from the survey as well. I believe it's the first time we've seen data of this type before, so it was very helpful and useful to see that. It was encouraging that a lot of the data was positive. And there, like you all have mentioned, there are some pockets where there is some room for improvement, as there is everywhere. I would, like Aaron, was struck by the number of parents who completed this survey. We've historically had a very low parent response rate for our survey. I'm curious what we can learn from this to help improve our response rate on other surveys that we're administering to families. So that's my first question. Is there anything that was done differently here that we can learn for improving the response rate on our other parent surveys? Or is this just a topic that families were more interested in?
It might have, I'm wondering, I'm just thinking aloud right now, so I apologize that my thoughts are not quite organized, but I'm wondering if part of it is that the students did the survey first and had the opportunity to go home and talk to their parents about it, and then the parent survey came out. I don't know if that has something to do with it. It might. I'm the parent of a fifth grader, and I know that on the day that she took it, obviously I was administering it to her, but she came home talking about it. And it was a dinner table conversation in our family. I don't know if that happened in other households, and then that sort of prompted some of the parents to then take the survey themselves. But I don't know if Jonathan can speak to anything else we did differently, but it's interesting to think about.
Yeah. One thing that was done differently is that this was a direct appeal through the district from my office to parents to opt in, and then for parents, guardians to take the survey. Panorama, in order to mask everything totally, sends surveys on their own, and our experience is many people ignore that like another spam email. So interestingly, say last spring with the Panorama survey, I think it was blasted 3 times, and Panorama tracks who's done it and who doesn't. In this particular case, we did 1 reminder to the whole group and got, as you see, a 60% return rate. So I think it says something. If we use Panorama again this spring, I think we need to speak to them about other possibilities so this doesn't get lost in the spam. Having said that, I think what Lisa said is spot on. And I think for a variety of reasons, this topic was really important to our community. And everybody on the committee was simply shocked by the results. In fact, when we did the opt-in from parents, we were prepared for a very low rate because we actually have to do something for us to get the response. So to have 2/3 on an opt-in is very, very high.
Yeah, that's the highest I've ever seen any of our surveys before for parents. So thank you for that. And I think we should, as a board, think about how we can continue to think about how we can get that response rate up for other surveys.
So, in terms of the content of what was shared today, again, I appreciate the comprehensiveness of the presentation, very thorough. Um, um, I've I've been thinking a lot about this topic of DEI and see a lot of implementations of DEI approaches, and that kind of run the gamut of to a wide range of things, some that I think are very strong and promising approaches, and some that I'm concerned about. I'm not saying that about Beecher, I'm just saying in general, and some of my observations of how some of these approaches are implemented in schools. One of the things I worry about has to do with this tension between centering certain identity groups and inclusiveness. And what I mean by that is sometimes there can be a tendency to place a lot more emphasis on some identity groups, which can result in ironically, others feeling less included because they feel like maybe their group or identity group is left out of the mix. And so I'm wondering, this is just a kind of a very broad general question for whoever wants to answer it. I'm wondering how you think about that tension and that balance at Beecher. How have you been doing that, and what kind of things do we need to think about in the future to really ensure that we're leaning more, we're leaning heavily towards the inclusiveness side of this, even when we feel like we need to attend to maybe some identity or diversity related issues that are not commonly addressed in schools.
Mike, I think that you're really referencing a worry that we all have as educators, especially, but just as people. You know, if you highlight one group but don't highlight another, will this other group be offended? Or, you know, like, how do we make sure that we're taking care of everybody and being inclusive of everybody? The only answer I can give you is that an acknowledgement, which I think I hopefully tried to get across in the presentation, that this is work that we are doing ongoing as a learning community, and we are all at various stages of our growth and learning and development, and sort of an ask that, you know, that everyone kind of understands that this is hard work. It's challenging for us to learn and grow and push outside sometimes of our comfort zones, but also that we're coming at all of it from a place of care. I did recently have to send out a message to our staff, and, you know, I ended it by acknowledging the fact that all of our staff members, all of us, everybody, and I can give you 10,000 examples of the many, many ways that everybody just cares deeply about the kids. And I think that I would hope that the parent community and the student population and everybody sort of recognizes that even if we make missteps, even if we don't do the best that we could all the time, that everybody sort of recognizes that we're all trying our very best. We care deeply about this work. That's why we're here. And that there is never any intention, there's never any malintent, there's never any intention to insult anybody. But I will say that's also why in the presentation I said, I don't want Black History Month to be the only time that we talk about the contributions of African Americans. It should be all year long, all the time, always. So even though we might highlight it and spend a little bit more time during Black History Month, but it should be all the time. The same with Hispanic Heritage Month, the same with Women's History Month, the same with learning about Diwali and Ramadan. You know, like, all of those things should be happening all the time, all year long. So I think that that's another way that we can be inclusive of all and not just at specific times of the year. I'm not sure I answered your question, but I tried.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I have one more question and then I'll shut up. So this has to do with the link between this work, this DEI work, and social and emotional learning. I see the two as having kind of close connections, especially with regard to, I guess what I'm thinking about here at least has to do with how we as people, and in the case of schools, as kids, perceive and deal with difference across a whole wide range of different ways that people can have differences. And particularly interested in differences in points of view and how, when you encounter that, how one can skillfully address that. And so I'm wondering about how you see this DEI work connecting with any of the responsive classroom work or other SEL work that's happening within the school, especially around encountering differences of points of view that can often lead to tensions and conflict between kids. How do we deal with that?
You're asking great questions, Mike. I think that they're incredibly connected. You can't really separate them out, honestly, I think. So I'll tell you that responsive classroom is really all about building that classroom community. And as a part of that process, it's really about respecting one another's differences, respecting one another's viewpoints, listening carefully, engaging in respectful disagreements, especially as kids get up in the older grades. And I think that teachers use a lot of natural, organic teaching opportunities to teach into that work, you know. So when students are playing a game and one kid is saying that another kid is not being fair, that's an opportunity for teachers to have a conversation with kids about turn taking and making sure that they're taking care of one another as partners and as classmates and supporting the learning that they're doing together. So many things happen organically in a classroom when you're working with students, and responsive classroom, you know, laying that foundation of building that classroom community allows those conversations to happen. And I think that in terms of how do you address issues, you know, that's really dependent upon, I think, the age of the child, and, you know, the way you talk to a kindergartner or a first grader is obviously different than the way that you might talk to a fifth or a sixth grader. But I will say again that our teachers, it goes back to responsive classroom also, and just like how you know your kids, you know, and teachers sort of know the kids that might need to walk away from a situation for a little while before coming to talk to an adult or another classmate, or the teacher, or the teachers will know the kids that want to engage in that conversation right away with a peer and want the adult support, or maybe don't want the adult support. So, I mean, that goes also back to responsive classroom and knowing your students deeply and working through things together. But I think that it's hard to give a hard and fast answer because it really is so dependent upon grade level and students and situations. You know, if, you know, solving a recess scuffle is far different than solving something that happens in the classroom during math workshop, for example. So it might be situational as well.
Thank you, Lisa.
All set, Mike?
I'm good, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Okay. Jonathan, are you all set with your superintendent's report?
Yes, so turning it to Lisa, who may have to come sit in my chair because I think her battery is dying.
Thank you. Lisa, VRS update. We can't hear you, Lisa.
Sorry about that. I just said my battery is dying, and I said you're probably all sick of hearing my voice, but you get to hear it a little bit longer. I'm going to just give a quick BRS update for you, and I want to start by talking about 2/2/22, which was on a Wednesday, not a Tuesday, and that confused a lot of people. But we did celebrate Tuesday by wearing tutus, ties, and or tennis shoes, or any of the above. And we actually engaged in a whole school walk as a community, which was, it really is one of my favorite things ever. We had music playing, there was impromptu dance parties happening along the route. We had police officers blocking off the entrance for us. One of them was very into it and literally high-fived half of the Beecher community, I think. It was pretty amazing. And it was a really fun way to sort of re-energize the community and just have a little fun as an elementary school. So I want to highlight that. I want to quickly mention that the Amity Middle School is beginning their work with our grade 6 students. They actually virtually visited our grade 6 students to talk to them about middle school, and they were very patient and kind and answered lots and lots of questions. A lot of questions about school lunch and what that looks like at the middle school. So it was wonderful to begin that process of getting our 6th graders ready to move on. Although I got a little emotional, I'm not gonna lie, because I was like, oh my gosh, they're so big and they're gonna be leaving us soon, but it was wonderful to start that process. There is a parent informational night coming up soon. You should have gotten an email blast about that if you are the parent of a 6th grader. And I want to end by talking about Hoot the Kindness Owl. I've mentioned Hoot the Kindness Owl in previous updates, but I want to tell you that a beautiful thing is happening. For those of you that don't know, Hoot the Kindness Owl is an owl that flies around Beecher. Don't tell the kids, but he's not real. And he likes to visit classrooms. And then on the morning announcements, we share the acts of kindness that Hoot sees. Now, a beautiful thing is happening in that this is spreading. We have some 6th grade students. I got an email from their teacher, and these 6th grade students wanted to hang up posters all around the building with inspirational quotes and, you know, words of wisdom. Some of them actually have little tear-off strips, and it said, you know, if you're having a tough day or if you want to share a smile, tear a piece off and give it to a friend. So that was it's really fun to see that sort of happening organically in the community. And we have a class of 3rd graders. This is the cutest thing in the world. But we have a class of 3rd graders who created on their own a scavenger hunt for our kindergarten friends, complete with clues that lead them to different parts of the building. And at the end of it all, they are able to actually end up and get a prize for completing the scavenger hunt. So I saw a kindergarten class today very excitedly walking around the building and finding those clues and talking about them and trying to solve them. So it was really, really fun to see. And I'm not going to say that this is all because of Hoot the Kindness Owl, but I definitely think they're connected. So those are my quick updates for now. And I look forward to more fun things happening in the spring. Any questions?
Anyone have any questions of Lisa? Just shout out. I'm not going to go around. Lisa, thanks so much. One thing I just wanted to say is I'm really happy about 2-2-2-2, even though we weren't in school on 2-2-2-2 Tuesday.
Yeah.
I was really happy to hear about that we were able to do a school-wide event because I think that's so important. So I think we're moving in the right direction. So thanks for that.
I will say everyone kept saying to me, why isn't it on 2/22/22? And I kept reminding them that that was winter vacation, so we couldn't do it. So that's why it was on a Wednesday, not a Tuesday.
It was all good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. We're up to 3.B, Facility Committee Report. I'll note that the minutes from the Facilities Committee meeting and the Facilities Department monthly report are in board book. Mr. Hughes, you want to add anything?
Yes, we met on February 15th. Big hot topic was our JACE has been replaced. That's essentially the brains of our HVAC system, which was huge. We're also keeping an eye on a leak in the superintendent's office, possibly coming up through the ground. Other than that, really not much to report out. Vito and team are doing an excellent job keeping up with things as always. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Anybody have any questions? Jonathan hasn't floated away yet, so we're in okay shape.
The leak has receded this week. Thank you.
Fingers crossed for no more heavy rains, Jonathan. 3.C, Finance Committee Report. Jonathan, you want to start? Jay, you want to jump in? However you guys want to do that, it's fine with me.
I can go through it, and Jonathan, I can leave the two parts that you've got to discuss. So I'll be very brief. Okay, the Finance Committee met on Wednesday, 23rd February at 4:30. The items presented for discussion by the administration was the current budget, which is the 21-22 fiscal year operating budget. Richard Hewitt and Jonathan presented these items as of February the 1st. We also talked about the operating budget for the next fiscal year, the 22-23, proposed revisions, which I think Jonathan will talk about, and revenue generators, which Jonathan is going to talk about, and cost reductions. So I'm going to be very brief here. The three key takeaways here, or the key points, are we're in great shape this year. The current budget forecast has gone down from a deficit of $44,000 and change to about $3,000. So this is great. We're right on target for the end of the year. And I'm hoping that, we'll be in a surplus come the end of the year, a small surplus, and that's my hope. Now, there were a few items that Richard Hewitt had noticed on this for us to keep a tab on. For example, the MRF might increase, and the key point here is the staff were now stable. So we're at a situation, and at that time of the year, where staffing is very stable. Jonathan's going to present a revision to the operating budget, which he discussed with us, from a 9.21% request to an 8.92%. I'm going to leave that to him. And last but not least, I always do a very quick presentation. We're a very new committee, a finance committee. However, we've got many, many years of experience. I've been a finance guy for over 30 years now. And so we've got a lot of experience. We've got good hands. Richard, I believe, has been practicing longer than I've had experience. And Jonathan's done a great job in identifying areas, for example, medical expenses, that have given us great achievements over the years. So the key achievements is, we've looked at reducing medical expenses. We're looking at revenue, revising revenue, which Jonathan's going to talk about in a second. We've had excellent budget workshops. If any of the community is interested in learning about how we spend the money, how the budget is designed, budget workshops were run by Richard Hewitt right through October, November, right through to pre-budget submission. And so that was really all I really have to say. There were some challenges like you would encounter in any sort of set of operations. And so we mentioned some of these to be things that we can't control. For example, if something breaks down in the year in facilities, I know Jeff did a presentation, just talked about the JACE, but there could be other things that come up and that would impact the budget. And so we really talked more generally about some of the challenges that we might face in terms of operations and in terms of revenue. I believe Jonathan's going to talk about these, so I'm going to pass it right over to him if you don't have any questions.
Okay, the first item is a recommended motion for the board to make after a brief presentation, and this is a proposed motion related to increasing the pre-K tuition for next year. And I'll show you briefly the basis for this. I believe I speak for the group when I say the members of the Finance Committee endorsed this recommendation at its meeting, at the meeting last week. This presentation is also in board book, but I want to share it. Jeff, you're on my screen. Can you see this? Thank you. Okay, so as I think most of the board knows, the district, like any public school district, is obligated to provide free preschool education for students with special needs at ages 3 and 4 who need such education. But like most districts, we also enroll what are called typical peers in our program, which, among other things, balances the students with special needs with those who are at the developmental levels that are appropriate for the ages. We have currently had a 4 half-day program, that is Monday through Thursday, costing approximately $2,500. And based on really solid investigation by Ms. Kiesel and Ms. DePalma, our pre-K teacher for over 20 years. The Finance Committee and now the board is asked to endorse moving this from a 4-day model to a 5-day model. And we'll show you some comparatives that suggest this is a good idea. It would still be a half-day model. Moving to a full-day model would require more personnel and space than we have. But this half-day model can justify an increase to $3,250 for next year. The comparatives are these. Bethany and Orange have already set their prices for next year. 5 half-day model is also $3,250. And we've also given you comparatives of 4 private preschool programs. The note here is that these are not full days. They may be half days or 3/4 days, etc. But you can see the private programs are sometimes considerably more expensive. They're all more than $3,250. And I point out we have an outstanding preschool program here in Woodbridge with certified staff. We would, with the $3,250, as you see, be exactly on par with Bethany and Orange. We would actually, through this, increase the amount of time for 3-year-olds by 25% and a very modest increase for the 4-year-olds. The staff time outside of these hours is used to assist with transportation, that is getting the students off and on, those with special needs of transportation, their contractual planning time, PPT meetings, and lunch. And Mr. Palm also has noted 5 days a week prepares our students better for the kindergarten experience. In the past, we have used the entire day on Friday for the pre-K teacher to attend PPTs. But looking at the schedule, it is conceived that the PPTs could be scheduled in the time that the students are not here Monday through Friday with minimal impact. We also have added art education to complement music and phys ed education for pre-K. And the times that those teachers are teaching are times that the pre-K teacher herself can be in a PPT meeting. We anticipate 10 typical peers for the program, and this would result in a proposed operating budget savings at the recommendation we have of $3,250 a student, budget savings of $5,500. The board does not currently have any policy related to preschool, and CABE recommends a policy on various aspects of preschool. And one thing the policy committee could consider is whether, if we did not get 10 residents from Woodbridge, whether we would open this to other towns. But that's really a subsequent conversation. Your action tonight is recommended because if you vote for the $3,250, we can start advertising for this immediately, which will obviously help get students in the program immediately. No increase in bus transportation costs. We're already paying for that bus for 5 days, and a modest increase in bus fuel. I'll stop sharing my screen. Happy to answer any questions, but I believe this comes to you from consensus of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Jonathan. Board members, do you have any questions about the proposed adoption of the pre-K tuition increase?
Jonathan, I know this is for a future discussion, but opening it up to other towns, is that for specific to pre-K? They want to follow directly into kindergarten after that at Beecher?
That's right. That would be specific to pre-K, because it's the typical peers in pre-K pay tuition, whereas, I will say that a board has an option of doing tuition-based programming for K-6. It wouldn't be out of the question, but I don't know that it would be my recommendation right now because we have space issues. But for pre-K, we want 10 typical peers. No, yeah.
Is it a hard sell to have those 10 children at the preschool? I feel like it always goes pretty quickly when I hear about the lottery system and whatnot.
It does. I mean, we're in making a change from the 4-day to the 5-day model. We're actually anticipating some more families could be interested because currently they have to find some other care on the 5th day. We actually won't know until we try to advertise it. There could be some who preferred 4 days who don't want 5 days. So you know, we'll know in another 3 weeks what we can get. And I think we have a great program, and we should be at least charging what Bethany and Orange do for it.
Sure.
No slight to them.
So Jonathan, I had a quick question just based off Brooks' question. So I believe the cost savings is 0 if we have 8 students. So what's the maximum number that we can take on?
I think 10 would be maximum given the space and the staff that we currently have. With more students in the program, we might have to add additional TA support, or we also could have potentially some space issues. It's always good to have goals for the future, though. Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. I'm going to make a motion to move that we authorize an increase in pre-K tuition for the 2022-2023 school year to $3,250 based on a 5-day model. Do I have a second? Jay? Any other questions or comments on the motion? I'll call the roll. Maria?
Yes.
Sarah Beth?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Brooke?
Yes, can I add, but keeping it to Woodbridge residents unless it was then sought out to be voted on to let outside towns come in, or no?
I don't think we're voting on it being
Okay.
Woodbridge
Okay.
residents now, because that wasn't part of the motion.
Okay, no problem.
So is it a yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
And I vote yes, it's unanimous. Marcia, thank you. Okay, Jonathan, Woodbridge Board of Ed proposed capital budget and operating budget for 22-23.
Could I just say, to answer that or to address that last issue, it's correct. The motion, we will advertise this to Woodbridge residents, and it would only be if something were to come to policy committee and the board that it would even possibly be opened up. But we might in 2 weeks have more than enough people in the lottery. Yeah, so we also have some updated revisions. This isn't an action item, but to update you, because as Deputy First Selectman McCreven mentioned earlier, the Board of Selectmen has recommended a reduction in our proposed operating budget, and would bring us to 8.92%. So we shared at Finance Committee methods to get this to 8.92, and for full transparency as we keep going, we thought that would be important to share. So just a moment, please. Mike, you're on my screen. Can you see that? Okay. So just remind you, I think everybody here, we supported this objective that we are maintaining the excellence of Beecher that has just sustained it for decades. And we have escalating student needs, some of which we've actually talked about in the prior presentation, some of which relate to COVID. But we're supporting a budget that helps meet that excellence, sustain the excellence, and meet the needs. Now, as a reminder to the board, these reductions on this slide were approved by the Board of Ed in late January. Actually, I guess it's a month ago today. Wow, lots happened in that month. But these reductions changed our proposal to 9.21%. And is a reduction of $670,000, which is not to be sneezed at. And this affects many non-instructional lines, which is obviously where we've sought to go. I think it's important for me to note, though, that the non-instructional lines are being reduced in ways that further reductions would be very, very difficult, if not impossible. In other words, we're going to these savings very early on. If we had to move further than the 9.21, the administration would recommend these revisions, which are largely technical edits that would accomplish an 8.92. For example, we have had some competitive hiring in a late certified hire this year. We can decrease electricity and fuel based on more updated bidding. The liability insurance, we have reviewed the actual covered items and made some changes there. And we've worked with Ezra to confirm their specific non-public nursing needs. This is slide 1 of 2. And this slide, I want to note that we do have to make a technical edit in the other direction, which is in yellow. It's the miscellaneous purchased services line, but essentially we have had a student enter our district who attends Winter Green Magnet School, and Woodbridge School District must pay that tuition. So that is a $6,000 increase to the budget. And as I've said before, when we're going to be transparent about ways we can cut, we also have to recognize things that are in the other direction. The move you've just made on pre-K tuition is the next line here. And then we recommend that the board would increase by $5,000 the revenue offset from the extended day program. Extended day offsets the board operating budget in several ways. This $5,000 could be accomplished through a combination of things that don't need to be addressed now, but it could be increased E-Day tuition. It could be expanding E-Day before school in a way that doesn't cost more money, or it could be a simply larger offset, or a combination of those. But the point is that these two slides would accomplish an 8.92% increase. And again, I just want to point out, we are really shaving in every non-instructional area in ways where there's really not much left there. We were asked to look also at some possibilities in transportation. And so at Finance Committee, we did a presentation that is on this one slide here. Approximately 4% of our budget is transportation, which is the cost of the buses to use the buses plus the fuel. State statute requires student transportation, and various statutes and contractual provisions govern how many buses, how long they run, how many stops, etc. There are two possible structural revisions which could be possible for the board to adopt later, and I just report on them, I think, neutrally to you now. First, we were asked what would be the impact of reducing a bus route. Right now, our buses are sized, if you will, to an average of 60 students, and the buses accommodate a normal-sized bus, 66 students. Now, granted, several parents drive their students to school every day, but the fact is we are required to have a seat for every student who might be picked up. In speaking with the transportation coordinator, reducing a bus route would move those buses from 60 on average to 66, or in other words, full capacity with three children in every seat. I would say that a complication to that would be that we are trying very proactively to be on top of positive student behavior on the buses. I would be concerned about maximum capacity on the buses, thus impacting the driver's ability to monitor every student and effectively drive the bus. Also, as a second bullet there, possibly reducing a bus route could impact the start and end time of the day, because right now there are some buses that drop the students off at Amity in the morning and immediately start going and picking up some elementary students. Even adding 3 or 4 more stops to one of those routes might impact their ability to be here in the morning at the time we need them to be. And finally, there is a transportation contract which has to be respected. Another option, which we were asked to investigate, and again, things are always good to investigate, is would it be beneficial to have 2 bus runs every day? In other words, to take some of the students maybe from far away from Beecher to school, have them held there, and then the same buses go and pick up students closer and bring them. And then the reverse happens in the afternoon. This almost certainly would require a revision of the transportation contract and have to involve Amity. In addition, we would need to supervise the students who are here before their classmates get here or after their classmates leave, and we would have to compensate staff for that. And so want to observe that while the board at some point might direct us to pursue this in more detail, there would be some impact on this that I think could be really problematic, and it certainly wouldn't be a straight savings to the board. And my understanding is this was done by the district some time ago, probably more than a decade ago, and ended for some of the same reasons I'm speaking about now. But again, we're looking at every area that is not instructional first. At any rate, I'll stop sharing my screen because, as Jay said, that I think is a fair presentation of what we talked about at Finance.
Thank you. Any questions or comments about that? Go ahead, Jay.
So Lynn, Jonathan, I've got a question of you and Richard that I think pondered about for a long time. So whenever you've presented the budget, we've always presented last year's actuals, last year's budget versus this year's budget. So we've looked at the cost side. Now, the school I know does generate revenue, which I don't think the community might be aware of. But the school does generate revenue. For example, they generate grant revenues. And there's something that I looked at neighboring schools, they generate an excess cost grant. And so what I noticed in neighboring schools is this was an offset on the budget. Why? Because this was deemed, and you could clarify this for me, this was the excess that was required for special education that's provided by the state. And what I saw on many school budgets was this excess cost grant sort of took away from the budget. Let's say your budget increased by 800,000. If your excess cost grant was 200,000, then your budget increase was only 600,000. So I'm wondering, is that an item that we need to consider? Should that be on our school budget? What's the legality of having it? Where is it, is the question. Because I believe, given the high special education needs that our district has, we could have a significant excess cost grant that could offset this high budget request of 8.92%. So is there any information, or could I make a motion tonight that I suggest that the administration look into these and investigate, where this source of revenue goes, if we have that at all?
And work that's done by Richard and Cheryl does generate that revenue. It has gone historically to the town, but Richard, now you were just on my screen a moment ago and now I don't see you anymore. I was going to call on Richard to speak about the detail. But we can't hear you, Richard.
I was saying that it's the computer seems to have a mind of its own. The history of the excess cost grant is the fact that the state decided at some point, some time ago, maybe 15, 20 years, that the costs for special ed could rise in a given year that were in unanticipated ways. So they decided to pass a law that said that any students whose costs exceeded 4.5 times the average per pupil from the previous fiscal year, the state would pick up the cost and it would go to the town in the same fiscal year. I give you an example of what's happening here, and Cheryl, correct me if I'm wrong. Back in the fall, special ed identifies what youngsters might reach the foundation level, which this year is in the $84,000 range. And today is the deadline for updating that information. And a check has, as you know, we sent out, I think the superintendent sent out in one of his messages, the town has received the first check, and late in May, they'll receive the second check. These were originally designed to go directly to the Board of Ed in each district in the state of Connecticut. It's one of the few grants that works in that method. And for whatever reason, history here has it that it goes to the town, and that has been a cooperative agreement. I don't know whether I've been clear enough, but given the number of youngsters we've tracked this year, there's a significant amount of money that is coming to the town of Woodbridge as a result.
So Richard, I have a quick follow-on. So if I read Connecticut General Statute 1076, am I interpreting it correctly that this is really reimbursement in excess of what the school actually incurs to compensate the school for the additional expenses that the school is incurring with respect to special education costs? Am I interpreting this correctly, and it's the responsibility of the municipality to reimburse the school for those? Because that's what I'm reading when I'm reading the general statute.
I'm not sure it's the town that's supposed to reimburse us. It's the state that's generating the money. All of the funds come through the town, but it is one that generally passes through the town to the Board of Education.
I think I got to the point I wanted. So it generally passes from the town to the Board of Education to cover these excess costs.
Yes.
Okay, so I think I'd like to make a motion on this that, or propose to make a motion on this, that we go and further investigate how the excess cost grant is applied and how, and if it should be applied to our budget and in what manner. Could I make a motion to that, Lynn, or could you draft something, or should I draft something on that?
If you say the motion, Marcia's great about noting it.
Okay, so I would like to make a motion, Marcia, that the superintendent and the business office go forth and investigate and provide more information on the excess cost grant, especially with respect to its application to our budget for fiscal year 22-23.
Marcia, did you get that?
I did get the gist of it, but it will be accurate in the minute.
Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you. Do I have a second to that motion? Maria will second that motion. Any discussion on the motion?
Lynn, can I say something? This is Tom. Sorry, I'm not on video.
Tom, you know what? You can't speak now because there's a...
I have to be in public comment? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
All right, maybe Richard can just clarify, because I think there's an error in that, but that's all I'll say. I don't know that that motion is accurate.
Okay, so the motion is to investigate. Is that correct, Jay? So this would be a motion to investigate excess cost and how it's processed through our town, is my understanding. Okay.
Question, Lynn?
Go ahead, Maria.
Question. So to clarify my understanding of the statute and to clarify what we are investigating further, the question is, in investigating whether those that excess grant comes back to the district, are you looking to see if that comes back to us into our budget, or are you looking to see if our budget is credited for the following year? So in other words, the money gets reimbursed according to Connecticut General Statute. It goes to the treasurer of the town. But what the treasurer of the town should look at, according to the general statute, is should that be offsetting the Board of Education budget, even if that offsetting is purely on paper, as you mentioned, Jay. So if our increase is X, that will bring down the increase because we have also brought in revenue. Not necessarily that those monies necessarily be transferred directly to the school. Is that a fair clarification?
Absolutely, Maria. So the way I see this is the credit side, as you've mentioned. So clearly all the revenues do go to the town and municipality. And so given that they go to the town, then is there a credit that's due to the school district for those expenses above and beyond that are reasonable, that this grant is meant to accommodate? So in essence, that's all I'm asking, for a credit against our budget. That would lower our budget significantly.
So great, thank you, Jay. So not necessarily that those monies be transferred to the district's account, but just that on our budget, it is looked at that we also brought in revenue, and that should offset our increase for the next fiscal year. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you for clarifying. I appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments on the motion?
I guess, sorry, Jay, is that the only instance where this happens, or are there other instances where we get credits from the state? I just think if we're going to assess this, we should assess it all at once.
I was going to take it on a piecemeal basis, but there are other instances. I believe Jonathan and Richard might be able to support me in this or provide me with some information on this. I believe we are reimbursed for expenses on the choice program as well, above and beyond what's reasonable. And again, that would fall into this category. So if you want me to revise the motion, I could clearly revise the motion to say, let's look at the revenue side in general in terms of excess costs. And I think if I use the term excess costs, Jonathan, would that be correct and capture both groups?
Or revenue more generally. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So if we can make that
I think you should, I would amend your motion to capture all the revenue.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks.
Point of clarification on the law. The law is meant to be current year funded. So the excess costs that we incurred for 2021-22 comes to you in that same fiscal year. The check, you received one already for this year, or the town has, and the other one will come in May. That is meant to help adjust current year funding.
So Richard, I have a question on that. So if it's meant to adjust current year funding, was that accounted for at the beginning of the forecasting period last year?
What we've experienced this year is not something that I believe we could have forecasted. I mean, you cannot anticipate who's going to move into town. We couldn't anticipate, so many youngsters coming in on the choice program that were eligible for special ed services. And maybe Cheryl can add a few other things, but by letting the town take the revenue and having them post it to the next fiscal year puts it into political hands. I'm sorry, that's probably not the appropriate thing to say, but it's in actuality, the decision-making goes someplace else.
So I've got a question with this. Again, just to follow up quickly, would it be reasonable to create a reserve within the Woodbridge School District that would accept these funds from our town in the current year that could then be applied to the following fiscal year, which is the budget year?
I don't believe that the Board of Education is under law allowed to set up a reserve account. It could be done, but it would have to be with the at the pleasure of the town council, selectmen, and the Board of Finance. It would be, if the town approved it, we could do it, but it's under their control whether that occurs or not. At least that's my understanding of how I've seen it in other communities.
So now you said other communities. How is it done there? Could you give us some idea? I know you've got a wealth of experience there. How is it generally done?
Well, in some of the communities I've worked, they tried to anticipate the amount of revenue they would get and adjust their budget accordingly, downward. So that, in other words, if we expected to get essentially the same amount of revenue next year as we did this year, we would adjust our budget in anticipation of that revenue. I will tell you that in all the years we did that, we failed miserably to anticipate an accurate amount. I'm sorry, but that's what occurred. And on two separate occasions, had to go back to the town for additional appropriation. And in other towns, you take the revenue and you put it against your budget and in the same fiscal year. And, you know, at the end, if there was money left over, you sent it back to the town. Sometimes that money was known ahead of time and it was redirected towards capital expense. But that benefits the community too.
Thank you, Richard. So I think I can make the motion now. Is Marsha have it?
Lynn, you're muted. Lynn, you're muted.
Thank you. You'd think I'd be better at this after 2 years. There's a motion on the floor, Jay, and it's been seconded. Do you want to amend your motion? You're muted, Jay.
I'd like to amend it to all revenues.
Okay, Maria, do you second that amendment?
I do. Could you just read the entire motion again, Jay? Please.
Oops, I think I'm going to need Marsha to send it back to me.
Marsha, can you read what you have and then Jay can let us know if that's right or not?
What I've got is that he made the motion to authorize the superintendent and business manager to further investigate how the excess grant is applied and to provide information on the processing of the excess cost grant, and to provide that information back to the Board of Education.
Okay.
So Marsha, can I change excess cost grant to revenues? And I think that might work.
Yeah, he's amending that to include all revenues.
Revenues. So I'm just taking the ESG out and putting the revenues, all revenues in.
And Jay, may I clarify that what we're looking for right now is information so that we understand what revenue is coming in or has the potential to come in to offset a budget in an effort to try to present and propose to the town a budget that is concise and transparent and shows that we've left no stone unturned in trying to find ways, creative ways to fund education in our town. Is that okay? Yes, I second that motion, Lynn.
Okay, thank you, Maria. You're all set, Marsha?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So I'll just make the comment to reiterate what I think Dick pointed out, that when we create our budget, just for public knowledge, we create our budget on what is known and not what is unknown. And so what ends up being our cost is not necessarily what was known when we budget, just so for public information. And that is one of the things that happened this year, hence the addition of some additional staff needs to address student needs. Okay, anything else? Jonathan, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think we can do that and inform the board with more details.
Okay, Richard, anything you need to add?
No, I'm fine.
Great. I'm going to call the roll for the amended motion that was made by Jay, seconded by Maria. Maria?
Yes.
Sarah Beth?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Brooke?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, it's unanimous. Okay, thank you. Jay, anything else for finance? Thank you. Moving on to...
I'm so sorry, Lynn, but I guess it just kind of got glossed over, and maybe I'm repeating, but to remind the board that this Thursday night at, I believe, 7, the Board of Finance will be having an initial conversation on our proposed operating and perhaps capital budgets as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jonathan. 3D Policy Committee report. Maria?
Thank you very much, Lynn. The policy committee met on February 3rd, and there we worked on the proposed policy changes that Dr. Budd is going to describe in a moment. Those were based on Public Act 21-2, which changed municipal election dates. And if I may, before Dr. Budd goes into detail about those, I just wanted to let everyone know that our next two policy meetings will be March 15th at 7 p.m. and April 5th at 7 p.m. And there we will continue our work on the bullying and culture policies, and in addition to updating our district policies to reflect federal and state statutes. So we hope you can join us then as well. Thank you, Dr. Budd.
Yes, in perhaps unnoticed news, I'm going to try to make this very interesting. You may not know that Connecticut Public Act 21-2 has moved the municipal elections in towns like Woodbridge that used to have them in May to November. And because the town board of selectmen did not have a 2/3 majority to move in a different direction, the elections for the Board of Education will also now be in November at the next appropriate time. So this affects two of our policies, 9110 and 9321. One thing is you see a lot of red striking out in 9321. That's because that language was already in 9110, and we try not to have the same language in two different policies, which makes it difficult to keep things updated. But in the new or the revised 9110, you will see a revision to reflect that based on the November elections, the Board of Ed's organizational meeting to elect officers would happen at the first meeting in November or December following the board elections. And the other change is editorial to conform with the new Public Act. And I should say that everybody on this Board of Education who might otherwise have had a term that ended in May of 2023, I think, Lynn, will be serving till November of 2023.
And I'll point out that anyone who has a term ending in supposedly May of 2025, that will now be November as well.
Extra few months.
Thank you, Jonathan. Maria, do you want to make a motion about that policy?
Sure. Thank you very much, Lynn. I make a motion that we adopt the revised policies 9110 and 9321.
Do I have a second? Thank you, Aaron. Aaron Williamson seconded. Any discussion on that those two policies? Okay, I'll call the roll. Maria?
Yes.
Sarah Beth?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Brooke?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
And I vote yes, it's unanimous. So we're all here until the November time. Thank you. Dr. Budd?
Sure. This is the next one is a total revision of policy 5145.52, which is the student policy on harassment. And for purposes of this discussion, harassment is related to an individual's status as a member of a protected class. The policy was last updated in 2014, and there have been some statutory changes, including to the definition and the due process of harassment. And also, CABE's model has significantly changed. So like we talked about with the bullying policy a month or two ago, the recommendation here was to take the CABE model because it's a vetted legal model as opposed to our current policy, which is not to be critical, but a little bit out of sync with current methods and recommendations.
Thank you, Dr. Budd. Maria, you want to make a motion?
Yes, Lynn, thank you. I make a motion that we adopt the revised policy 5145.52 harassment.
And do I have a second? Jay, thank you. Motion made by Maria, seconded by Jay. Any discussion? I would just point out that this particular policy is a student policy on student harassment, and that the policy committee noted that the corresponding staff policy will be looked at our next meeting, or the meeting after that Maria announced.
Thank you, Lynn.
Just for public knowledge on that. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to call the vote. Maria?
Yes.
Sarah Beth?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Brooke?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
And I vote yes, it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're up to 3. Anything else, Maria, on policy?
No, just to reiterate that those next 2 meetings were March 15th and April 5th.
Thank you. And now we're on 3.E, CABE liaison report. Maria and Sarah Beth are our CABE liaisons. I think Maria has a report this evening.
Thank you. And also included in the packet on board book, there is also some highlighted points with regard to this update. The first part of the update refers to the engagement that this board has had with some CABE activities. The first is on January 28th. Both Dr. Budd, myself, Brooke Hopkins, and Sarah Beth Delpreet attended the CABE legislative breakfast. We connected with other CABE Area 7 superintendents, board members, and our respective state representatives. All of the members there, shared challenges that we've been facing as boards and as districts with our legislators. Not surprisingly, most of those revolved around budget planning and the impact the pandemic has had on us. CABE also presented and discussed at their meeting their 2022 legislative priorities for the current legislative session in Connecticut. And those are also included in the board packet, but briefly, the legislative priorities are to strengthen the support for social and emotional learning through professional development for our educators and resources for the students and our communities. They would like to, the other legislative priorities are to remove the cap that is currently in place on the special education excess cost grant. And that ties into our presentation before, that has the potential to have a great impact positively on our budgets and district budgets around the state. There are rising special education costs around the state, and we are looking to revise these policies to really take some of that state funding and help out our local districts. And lastly, on the diversity, equity, and inclusion, they want to support the recruitment, hiring, and retention of teachers and staff from many diverse backgrounds, and to further support our efforts in the district. On February 23rd, CABE had a seminar called Board Meeting Fundamentals, run by Patrice McCarthy, their Deputy Director and General Counsel, and their staff attorney from CABE. Dr. Budd and Lynn Passaic attended, and I watched the recording of that video. And for the other board members, it's also available in the CABE library. They have been responding to our concerns that not everyone has a scheduled lunch hour to make some of these meetings, so they have placed a lot of them into the CABE library. So you can go through and check out the full presentation and the PowerPoint there as well. They talked about civil and productive meetings, the basics of parliamentary procedure to help facilitate that, and some discussion about FOI requirements and developing agendas. And lastly, on the engagement section, there is a board orientation packet that CABE has put together. I have just received it and I looked through it and am looking through it, and it's very informative for new board members. So I would encourage everyone to reach out and attain a copy of that. It has some great information in there. Upcoming events. On March 8th, there is another webinar, Leading Civil Meetings. On March 10th, we have our virtual day on the Hill to connect with our legislators again. CABE has a program that they've started called the CABE Affinity Groups, and those are being run by Dr. Martha Bracken Harris, the DEI consultant to CABE, and Robert Rader, the executive director. The focus of these affinity groups is some networking with other Connecticut boards of education, and to share experiences and goals related to diversity, equity, inclusion, culture in our communities, and to support each other in that effort. And finally, CABE is hosting on April 25th a school multidisciplinary threat assessment virtual training. This is an all-day training that's going to focus on problem solving and a problem-solving approach to violence prevention. And so we will, discuss as a board who we'd like to send to that virtual training. I think that would be very beneficial to our district. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Maria. Sarah Beth, did you have anything you want to add?
No, that was great. Thanks, Maria.
Thanks. Okay, 3.f, upcoming meeting presentations. March's Board of Education meeting will include presentation on technology. Is there anything specific board members would like to see included in that presentation?
Can I ask a question? Just
Absolutely.
Is this technology as it relates to our kids learning technology, or technology as it relates to technology in the building? Or
and the fact that I couldn't get the computer to work.
Right.
Right. It may be both of those things and more.
So I think one of the questions that I would have is what grades are receiving what technological education, and do we think, given the world that our kids are entering, and given that they go on to middle school, that we're providing them with sufficient technological education? And I mean, and I might be incorrect, but I think technology may end in 4th grade. And also specifically, I'm interested in things like, having coding in more general education, because I do think like every kid should learn basic coding. So I would be interested in learning a little bit more about the curriculum as it relates to our kids and what they get in various grades, and also where you think we need to grow and continue to build.
We can do that.
Great. Anything else? Jay?
Jonathan, are you going to also talk about the technology infrastructure Lynn just mentioned? Are you going to talk about that too, on the upgrades?
Lynn may be on a slide of the presentation. Yes.
A star, a celebrity, Jay.
We're going to try to get through the presentation with everybody, including myself, being muted and unmuted at the right time. So yes, everything and more.
Great. Board members, if you come up with anything else that you think of in the next week or so, shout out to Jonathan. I'm sure he'll include it, but please don't wait till the last minute, in fairness to the people who are going to present and prepare. Go ahead, Jonathan.
I'm sorry, I think Brooke was first.
Well, no, I just had a question about technology in the computers, if we're going to be able to recycle those to families and staff.
Yes, and that involves something coming to the policy committee likely in March, which is a proposed revision to the policy on disposal of equipment. So I think you'll see that one soon. Is that answer your question, Brooke?
Yes, thank you.
Lynn, I'm so sorry. I stand corrected. The Board of Finance meeting this Thursday is at 6 p.m. So I wouldn't want you all to tune in at 7 and miss out on important conversation.
Right. So thanks for the correction, Jonathan. Yep. Great. So on that same note, I'll make my public service announcement for this meeting and say that the March meeting of the Board of Education will be held on Monday, March 21st. At 7 p.m. Also of note for the public's information, the board's finance committee will meet on Tuesday, March 15th at 4:30. Maria spoke twice about the policy committee meetings, one on March 15th, one on April 5th, both at 7 p.m. and as Jonathan mentioned, the Board of Finance meeting as well. So we like to keep the public informed about upcoming meetings and hope that they'll tune in. Great. Moving on to number 4, new business. Dr. Budd, any new business?
No.
Okay. Number 5, 5A, public comment. Anyone who would like to make public comment, please raise your hand in the participants list. Tom, do you wish to make public comment?
Yes, thank you. I will applaud the board for, working on that budget, but I will point out, as Richard said, that I think it's really important to understand that the excess costs were designed to help defray unexpected special ed costs during the year. And I don't think you can, as Richard said, somehow use that to offset what's going to happen for the next budget, because you have no idea whether you're going to get anything. We won't really know until after this budget is approved where that's going to go. So I think it's good that you're looking into it. And I would also, again, remind the board and the public that the relationship between the Board of Ed and the town has been studiously worked on to be very cordial. And the whole goal was that we wanted, as you are doing, trying to create a budget that it reflects as accurately as possible when you create it, what happens. But you're going to have some unexpected things like the insurance or special ed costs. And the town has always come through and said that when those costs arise, we will cover them. I think you have to be a little cautious that there are other towns which basically expect the Board of Ed to find those excess money in their own budget and make cuts. And I think it's important for everyone in town to understand that if you talk to, I'm not going to put words in Richard's mouth, but I think he said it at the Board of Finance meeting. I think that Tony has said it as well, that we have a very unusually cordial relationship between the town and the Board of Ed. And so let's just tread carefully, look into things and do it. I mean, absolutely, but just tread carefully, because there are those who have proposed in the past that other relationship. And that's all I'll say. So keep up the good work. Keep trying to find things and tune in. I guess that's all I'll say.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate you talking about the good relationship that we have in this town. So thanks for adding that. I see that Josh Gelder has a hand raised in the participants list.
Yes, good evening. Josh Gelder, 48 Brookwood Drive.
Thank you.
So I wanted to say that I think the permission slip for the survey for the parents before the kids could take it was appropriate. And I'm hoping that if there are any plans to, further teach some of these topics in school in person, that the parents would have the same opportunity to opt in or out of some of that. And I don't mean all of it. I think just some of it for a 5th and a 6th grader, some of the stuff is heavy stuff. And, when I was in 5th and 6th grade, I would get in trouble with my school setting. So I hope if we do decide to further this education, if you call it, that the parents would, again, have a say in whether or not our children should be part of that. Thank you.
Mr. Gelder, you can put your hand down in the participants list. And next I see Jeffrey Luck as his hand raised.
Thanks, Lynn. So I first of all, I just really need to talk about the times of this meeting. We have these comments, and we had 51 participants in the beginning, and now we have around 32. Some are doubled. And I do believe that you guys keep talking about, oh, I'm sorry you like hearing myself talk, but yet you're all in an echo chamber, and you all just keep bloviating about how wonderful you all are and how wonderful this DEI is and how everything is just wonderful and great. It's not. Parents participate in that survey because they're angry, they're pissed, and they don't want to hear about all this crap that has to keep being given to the kids. I echo what Josh said, that this DEI should be limited to the parents. They shouldn't be teaching about LGBT and all these different things in school. It's up to the parents to teach them. Why is it that we have a war going on, but you can teach them transgender, but you can't teach them what's going on between Russia and Ukraine? You know, I had emailed somebody about Pearl Harbor Day, and they said that's taught in the high school. It's really not taught here. I think we're so losing focus on being woke, and I understand that everybody has the right to their opinion, and I apologize if I'm offending anyone. But the fact of the matter is, we need to teach school, these kids, education, the math, the reading, the writing. We're spending so much time. You know, I was listening to Mike earlier, and he's about, you know, where are some of us missing the boat? You know, are we focusing too much on one or the other? Well, after 3 hours, and as a Jew, I feel I don't belong in this community. I think it's ridiculous of what you guys are doing. 3 hours of this, you spoke about nothing about education. Nothing. What we're going to do to better the school. So again, if I'm offending anyone, I apologize. It's not meant to be, but this is my opinion. There's 32 people left on the participants list because everybody's tired. You want a longer participation. You want more parents involved in the PTO and everything. Stop spending 3.5 hours just rambling. That's all I have to say. And again, I respect all of you, but it really is my opinion, and I apologize if it offends anyone. Have a great evening. Good night.
Thank you, Jeff. Kristen Turkos?
Oh, it's James Turkos this time.
James Turkos, thank you.
14 Bear Hill Road. And just real quick, we didn't hear an answer to the question that Kristen asked at the beginning regarding what kind of like context or explanation the kids were given for the survey regarding gender identity, non-binary. Because it's not going to be a concept that a lot of the kids might not even know what that even means. And I mean, Dr. Budd said he thought it might come up during Lisa's presentation, but all we heard was it was an optional question. So I just wanted to see if we can get clarification on that.
So, Mr. Turkos, I'll just mention that I believe Ms. Sherman said that the term was not defined for students.
Well, then how do you give them a survey where, I mean, how do you draw conclusions? So how do you draw conclusions from a survey? I mean, I feel like we're putting a lot of like stock in that. There's a lot of time spent on that survey, on the survey results. I mean, you know, you have a couple of kids, like you have like a 10-year-old kid saying, oh yeah, maybe I get treated differently sometimes. It's like, oh my God, we cannot. It's like a federal case now. Like somebody feels like they were treated differently. And we're putting a lot of stock in a survey without really, I mean, these are kids. We don't know. I mean, and that's why it goes back to what like has been said previously. A lot of these types of things, like, the onus really should be more on the families and the parents to like know their children and know what's going on. And pushing a lot of these things into the schools and out. I mean, there's a lot of legislation now in Hartford this session regarding mental health and like pushing the mental health concerns regarding the students out of the house and into other places. And nobody's against kids' mental health, of course not. But it's just, I think that's just like a concern, a common theme we're hearing from some people. And about what Jeff said about the board bloviating around, I wasn't going to be so unkind, but I did kind of have a little bit different take on the meeting last week, where everybody was like congratulating themselves for, you know, consensus building, and we had a unanimous vote. Like, okay, fine, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of like arrogance and hubris shown, like that we're smarter than everyone else because we're Woodbridge. Like we know better than the CDC now. All of a sudden, even though we were, you know, beholden to the CDC for 2 years. All of a sudden we're gonna have like metrics and mitigation, you know, some kind of I don't know. I mean, like, if you look at what Orange, Bethany, and Amity did, and then for us to say, well, let's hold on a second, we're better and smarter, and I don't know. I just was, that was a little, I had a little bit different take on like the little congratulatory, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of rambling now, but that, well, anyway, everybody have a good night. That's it for me, I guess.
Thank you, Mr. Turkos. Just going to scroll through one more time. I don't see any other hands raised in the participants list. Do you, Jonathan?
I don't know.
Okay.
Well, Kristen Turkos, but I think that's left, right?
Oh, Mr. Turkos, can you put your hand down? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on to 5B. The board will enter into executive session in accordance with state statute for the purpose of discussions in regard to a matter which would result in the disclosure of records exempt from disclosure based on attorney-client privilege and matters concerning school security. For the public's information, there may be action based on items discussed in executive session when the board returns to public session. Do I have a motion to go into executive session inviting Dr. Jonathan Budd for a discussion concerning attorney-client privilege and security?
Yes.
Maria has made the motion. Do I have a second? Sarah Beth?
Excuse me, Lynn?
Yep.
And to invite Mr. Hewitt for the first topic as well?
Okay, will you amend your motion to, I'm sorry, Dick, will you amend your motion? Let me read the motion and see if this is what the motion is that you want to make, Maria. Move that we enter into executive session to discuss a matter which would result in the disclosure of records exempt from disclosure based on attorney-client privilege, to discuss matters concerning security strategy, the deployment of security personnel, and/or advices affecting public security, and to invite the superintendent to join the board for both topics and the interim director of business services and operations to join the board for the first topic only. Was that your motion, Maria?
It was, Lynn.
Thank you. And Sarah Beth, is that the motion you seconded? That's wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Let's see if I see everybody. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, let's do with raise our hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's a unanimous vote, Marcia. So I'm going to tell the board members to go to executive session, take 2 or 3 minutes to use the bathroom, and we'll see you in a minute. Bye.